Hey everybody, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, and I really appreciate you being part of our community. And it's so great to do interviews with people who just have amazing stories and insights to share. It's been so cool. I did just want to mention before we get started that I am going to be uh, incognito a little bit for a few days, doing some traveling to see my mom up in Pennsylvania. So you'll see a little bit of a lull. I will be back, but it's just one of those things where glad the kids get to see their grandmom for a few days. So if you don't see me, it's not because I'm sick or whatever. I'm just taking some time for family. That's what summer's about, right? If you can. But I'll be back as soon as I can, and we've got some great stuff lined up for July. Some great people. I'm so excited, and some great presentations as well. But with that in mind, I like to mention as well, always when I get started, that if anybody who's watching is interested in sharing your story, please feel free to reach out to me. All the ways to do so are beneath this video. I'd love to get you set up with your own interview if it feels like a good fit. But with that being said, we're going to kick off today. We're going to bring in our guest. So today we're speaking with Bertha Vazquez. Bertha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Yeah, it's my privilege. And I'm going to give a quick bio and then we'll get started. Bertha lives in Coral Gables, Florida, originally from Miami. So totally a Florida resident. I'd love to hear more about that, how Florida's been for you. I was down there a little bit over sometimes for work, but it's a really hot state. Boy, it's hot. But anyway, Bertha is a retired science teacher who taught middle school for 34 years in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. She is the education director at the Center for Inquiry, which is an international nonprofit organization that promotes reason and science. Bertha runs a teacher-led network of more than 100 teachers who have presented more than 400 professional development sessions for their fellow teachers in all 50 states. Her multifaceted approach to teaching climate science has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, Earth Magazine, and in a book and film series called Empowering Young Voices for the Planet. She's the editor and contributing author of the book On Teaching Evolution, published in 2021. She's also worked on several translation projects, including the translation of a book called A Brief History of 4 Billion Years of Evolution, Understanding Darwin by Maria Jinich. Bertha is a regular speaker at skeptical and humanist conferences and is a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. There's a lot more. You've done a lot. I could probably add a lot more to that bio, but for the sake of time, I'll cut it off there. If there's anything that you want to add to that or clarify, feel free. And then if you want to add anything fun about yourself, tell us about your hobbies, and then we'll get started.
So my hobbies. Okay. Well, I love playing tennis. That has to be my main hobby. I play a lot of tennis since I was a teenager. And I took up the ukulele. That's kind of fun. A few years back, I think just before the pandemic, not because of the pandemic. And the reason is strange. A lot of people in my family, I grew up with all my relatives. We lived in the two houses, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great aunts, my great uncles. And a lot of them got dementia, including my own father. So I kind of spent my life finding ways to avoid the minefield of potential dementia that is before me. I know that's not a very fun fact. It's kind of a morbid one. But I've done always a lot of things, like just stay active, learn another language, try to eat. I'm left-handed, so I eat with my right hand. I'm not musically gifted at all. Like, I'm really bad. So learning the ukulele doesn't come easy to me. So learning the ukulele and trying to get sleep and all the things you're supposed to do to avoid dementia, because I grew up kind of traumatized by seeing people I love fall into that abyss, Sorry, that wasn't fun at all, Tim.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. But I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, because I think that's a really good point, is that there are things that we can do earlier in life to prevent it. We don't have to wait till we're 70 to start saying, let's take it seriously. It's so critical, whether you're talking about that or heart disease or liver disease or whatever. Like, there's so many medical issues that we can attack in our younger years and make a huge difference, especially when it comes to, like you said, taking care of your body and your mind. I love the way you're focusing though on your mind, because I do the same thing. I actually moved from Pennsylvania to Georgia many years ago, back in 2008, for a special doctor. I had severe insomnia and no one could cure it. And the special neurologist cured it very quickly with no medicine after a month, after 25, 30 years. And so I've always thought since then, like, the mind really is something that you need to be, doing the right things for, keeping it as healthy as you can. And it's certainly a great reminder. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. What, how far along are you with the ukulele? Can you play?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I had a ukulele club when I was a teacher. And now I have
Nice.
a ukulele club. Those same the students are not joining us anymore, but those same teachers, we meet once a month. Um, I'm okay. I'm not great, but I do put a lot of time into it considering my level. Like other things
Mhm.
come easier to me than ukulele, that's for sure. But it's fun.
That's
And
awesome. Very cool. I'm jealous.
smile when somebody pulls out a ukulele, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
I've got
Great stuff.
7 here next to me next to the desk, as a matter of fact.
Hmm. Very cool. Like, can't wait to see your a YouTube channel on Bertha's ukulele skills.
No, I wouldn't get any subscribers. 0.
Well, we're so glad you're here. Your story is a little bit different for anyone that's joining us. That's like a regular to my channel. You know that we typically are talking about people who are going to share a story where it involves being heavily indoctrinated into Christianity. You fully believed it, and your journey was towards a breakdown, a sorts, a crossroads. Your story is sort of including that, but we're going to focus a little bit more heavily on the science, obviously, because that's your forte. And so I'm looking forward to sort of picking your brain about some of that and hearing sort of how the science became a big piece of it. I wish I could say science was a big piece of it for me. My story was not that, but I think it's a huge piece of deconstruction that a lot of us, especially like 6-day creationists, it's like that was a big deal to switch teams like that and to realize it. But I'll share some of my parts of my story throughout it as we get into your story. But could you just take us back before you talk about anything current day? Could you take us back to the earliest days? What was it like as a kid growing up? What were you taught about the Bible and Jesus and heaven and hell and salvation? And just how did your relationship with the religion evolve?
Well, I grew up, my parents are political Cuban exiles. They came over separately and they met in the States in 1961. They both worked at the Cuban Refugee Center in downtown Miami, which is now the Freedom Tower, which just celebrated its beautiful architecture, just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And so I grew up in a very traditional Cuban Catholic environment. My dad never was very Catholic. He told me, I went back to Cuba with him a couple times, many decades later, and he told me that he was part of the Catholic youth group because the Catholic youth group in Cuba, we're talking 40s and 50s, they were the only group helping poor people. They were the only group helping out to the Afro-Cubans and finding and getting education for them. And or he may have been wrong about that. That is allegedly the only group, but that's why he got really involved. Also, my dad's family, my mom's family was my grandfather was a pediatrician. The women in the family were pharmacists and things like that. My dad comes from Spanish immigrants to Cuba, so it was pretty like working class environment. My parents would never have met in Cuba, put it that way. And he was taken out of school early to work. And he went to church, and the Jesuit priests noticed how bright he was. And they paid for his education, or they gave him a scholarship to go to the school. And so he wasn't anti-religion. Like, he loved his George Carlin and his Chris Hitchens, but he was very thankful for what the church had provided to him. But I grew up, it was kind of a given that I was going to go to Catholic school, which I did for 13 years. It was a given I was going to go to church every Sunday, but my father didn't go. My mom took us. And it was 1970s Catholic school. I mean, the nuns and the priests and the rulers. Usually it was the poor boys that got hit with the rulers on the knuckles and things like that. But I have to say, if there's any trauma, it comes from the idea of hell and the idea of sin and that kind of thing. If anything, though, we could discuss that. But I think, to me, my departure was, it just didn't make sense. It wasn't, I've always been kind of someone, I'm very curious, I'm a thinker, and I can go back to elementary school and remember looking around the room going, wait, does anybody notice that that's kind of nuts? Like the story of Noah, for example. That was in 3rd grade. I love old books, and we read these little Bible stories. And to this day, I remember the leather binding and the binding coming apart and the strings coming out because they were used over and over and over again. And I love these Bible stories. And at the time, my little group of friends, we each had a favorite animal. Mine happened to be the cat, and my friend was a dog, a horse, a rabbit. And we get to the story of Noah, Tim, and he drowned everything. God, of course, at the time I didn't know the word biocide, but because of a few people misbehaving, according to the church misbehaving, or I know there wasn't a church at the time, but according to the morality of the Old Testament, they were misbehaving. He killed the cats and the dogs and the camels and the horses. And I found this absolutely horrifying. I thought, how can he do that to all life on earth because there were a few people misbehaving? That was my first stepping away from it all.
I gotta say, that's amazing that you had the bravery at that age. I mean, I know indoctrination is different in different groups, but like just to have the bravery to criticize and to critique at least the story that early in the party line is so
not
good.
out loud.
I mean, that's great. I mean, I was the sucker in the room. I took it all in and said, this is all true, and I love it. So I'm proud. I'm amazed that you could do that so young. What else? What other things did you notice as you were hearing the stories? Like, what other stories stood out to you as horrifying?
Oh God! And I think you can ask a lot of atheists this question. In the story of Abraham and Isaac, I have a son now, and I mean, if somebody told me, or a supernatural being told me to sacrifice my son on an altar to show my love or loyalty, I would not do it. And I can't believe that was asked of him to do something like that, you know? Yeah. So these are the stories that I started butting up against, but I kept it very, very quiet. You know, I didn't say anything. It wasn't until high school. There were a couple, like, I call them reverse roads to Damascus. You know, it's kind of the opposite of what happened to Paul. One very clear moment in my life, I remember I was in church because by high school, I was an atheist, but my mom said, you have to go to church with me till you turn 18. So I did. I found it incredibly boring too, I'm sorry to say, but we were in church, and in Catholic Mass, after communion, the priest gives some community news. And the priest said, I was probably 15. And the priest said, you know, a little boy in our congregation was hit by a car. He was biking, and through the grace of God, he has recovered. He is in the hospital. Thankfully, he's recovering. I knew that little boy. He was a little brother of a classmate. And then he also said, and the Garcia family, the husband, he had a heart attack at breakfast and died in front of his family. And his daughter, Cecilia, was in my class through 8th grade. We went to separate high schools. And I just sat there and I thought, wait a second. Through the grace of God, we're crediting him for this child surviving, but we're not saying a word about the fact this family watched, you know, this traumatic experience of seeing their father die in front of them and their husband. And I found that dichotomy hard to work out in my head. And I think then the nail in the coffin was and I do respect Catholicism for this. We took a Religions of the World class in 10th grade, and the teacher's name was Mr. Croak. He was very handsome. We were all in love with him. Very nice guy. And we were doing the different religions. And I'm trying to figure this out in my head. Like, well, Hinduism has all these gods, and is Allah the same as my God and Jehovah? And how does this all work together? And we got to the Hare Krishnas, and he's explaining the Hare Krishnas. We're taking notes, and I went up to him after. I said, but Mr. Croak, it's the same God, right? I mean, they call it different things, but it's the same God. And he looked at me very calmly, and he goes, no, it's not the same God. And you know what? I have no idea if this is true, but I have a feeling he was trying to tell me something. I have a feeling he was trying to say, isn't this all freaking ridiculous, Bertha? I really do. Anyway, that was it. Like, okay, either I'm right or wrong, they're right or wrong, or we're all wrong. And that was it for me. That was 10th grade.
I have a lot of questions, but I was just going to make a quick comment about something you said earlier real quick. The whole idea that where you're seeing certain families have a tragedy and everything works out okay in the end. Other families have a tragedy and it doesn't work out okay. Just you kind of get trained to say God's still good either way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he took his precious angel to heaven because he
Mm-hmm.
wanted them in heaven or whatever, and they're rejoicing, they're painless, they're full of bliss. So be glad. And the other family that, you know, that had something that was bad but turned out good, they're, you know, it's good because God was blessing the family. It's so weird how that you're trained to basically say God is good either way. But one thing that really, I would say, I noticed some of those things growing up, but one thing that added to it a little bit that's similar but different was the idea that God is going to get you if you disobey him. He's really going to get you.
That
And
was, yeah.
there was this one
Yeah.
family that, just to give a quick example, there was a family that was in our church, and they had 3 kids, and they were apparently having marital problems, and eventually they were telling the pastor, we're going to get divorced. And back then, of course, it was a little bit more aggressive, the way evangelicals said you cannot divorce. God hates it. Do not divorce under any circumstances. I don't care if you're abused. I don't care if he's, you know, whatever, slept with someone else. God wants you to be an example of the gospel. So stick with it. Don't divorce. And apparently the pastor warned them, like, as they kept on moving in that direction, like, if you do this, if you get divorced, God is going to get you. God literally will make you pay severely for this. And they went forward with the divorce, and they had 3 kids, and and their youngest child was a daughter who, she was about 8, 9 years old maybe, and sweet as could be, just the sweetest little girl. She had muscular dystrophy, so when she walked with a severe limp that was going to get worse over time. And she was over at a sleepover at another friend's house, and there was a house fire, and they you know, the little girl and her friend died. And I remember it was like this, like, whisper through the church, like, see, God told you don't do this. He will get you. And you lost your daughter over this because you insisted on sitting. And you add those things in, and it's like, God blesses and he doesn't bless. You should praise him either way, but also he's going to get you. Some of that stuff was like, man, this sounds, it was so, of course, as a Christian, you're like, but that's God. That's our loving God. Will not the judge of the earth do right. But it still, like, puts that anxiety where you're like, do I really feel comfortable defending this? You know?
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that was a big one to me, because I think a lot of Christian people are kinder than their God, right? It was Gandhi who said, I like your Christ. He seems like a nice person. Well, actually, he said it the other way around, didn't he? I like your Christ. I'm not sure about your Christians. I feel it's the other way around. There's I mean, there's wonderful Christians in my life, and I don't think they would condemn you to, you know, punish you by taking away your child. That's just evil. And
yeah,
there's that. And you mentioned the family and the divorce. Throughout all of these stories I told you, there was also this undercurrent of, dang, this is misogynistic. God the Father, God the Son, he, him, capital H, capital H. And as a Catholic girl, I had really 2 role models I saw. By the time I was in high school, I was saying I could be a virgin mother or I could be a prostitute. These are my role models. And I can't be a virgin mom, and I don't really want to be a prostitute. And I felt like my roles were limited within the church. And I remember when I actually wrote to the Archdiocese of Miami-Dade and asked to be excommunicated, because you could formally do it in a letter. And I don't want to be considered part of their numbers. And now I'm in my 20s when I did this. And the Archbishop actually responded, which, wow, you know, kudos to him. But he said, you can't excommunicate yourself, because God is your father and the church is your mother. Boom, you lost me right there, dude. Why do I have to have a subservient position because I have 2 X chromosomes? It just makes me so mad that half the population is subservient to the other half. And I know that's a theme, I think, probably, am I guessing, for a lot of the women on your show, that that was hard for me to get to.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that too, because I think it wasn't as big of a motif in my mind at first, or in my deconstruction, but where it became a bigger motif was as I studied mythology, realizing, I mean, 2 big things. Number one, that the Holy Spirit was in many ways originally a feminine construct,
Yes.
and, you know, based on the idea of the Greek Sophia, but also the idea, probably more importantly, is that Yahweh originally had Asherah as a wife, and that was originally from an earlier story, even where it was, Elyon with Asherah, and then it kind of evolved. But the idea of like, if God did have a wife, like, why didn't you tell me? Number two, why was she written back out? And it's so critical to, once you see it, you're like,
it's hard to unsee. It's like a magic wand over your head.
Yeah, but it also, I mean, puts into perspective the idea, like, as you're using your imagination to say, how could this religion have evolved? Maybe in large part, not all, but in large part, maybe it really was about men just saying, we just want the control.
Yeah. Okay, so we can talk about the influences in my life, and clearly many of them are scientific writers and thinkers, but there's two that who are not, and one of them is Tom Robbins. He died last year. He died in his 90s. I read a book called Skinny Legs and All. In Skinny Legs and All discusses what religion was like before the monotheistic religions kind of took over. And he has this beautiful paragraph, which I have memorized. I will not bother you with it, but it's about how the goddess was changeable and playful. And she looked upon natural chaos as lovingly as she did natural order, and how a tribe of nomadic Hebrews held a coup against her some 6,000 years ago. And much of what we know as modern civilization is in the result, and how life still begins in the womb, but man's institutions, laws, and elaborate weaponry exist primarily to maintain that control that they have. I'm paraphrasing, but that book was pivotal for me. And I probably read it around 18. And the other thing that was pivotal for me was I'm a lifelong Billy Joel fan. And I grew up very Catholic, and I love the song Come Out Only the Good Die Young, which I can play on the ukulele. Nice. And that song, I rather laugh with the sinners and cry with the saints. The sinners are much more fun. And your mom really didn't care about me. She never said a prayer for me. And you're trapped in your church praying your rosary. And that song was also very pivotal for me. So I'd say a lot of influences were coming from a lot of things. And it wasn't so much the trauma, which there is some trauma, because to tell a kid you're going to hell because you missed church or whatever is hard. But for me, it was more like an intellectual or a rational. It was incongruent. These things didn't go together for me.
Can I ask, just stepping away from the church and the theology itself for a minute, there is, I mean, this may relate, I'm not sure, but it would relate for a lot of people that I would ask. So feel free to change this question if it's not really relevant, but there is a difference between the church, like the Catholic Church, and the theology and the culture and the general milieu of ideas that they're accepting. And in the sense of things that you could publicly go through the motions, you could go and you could take mass, you could kneel, whatever, you could go to confession, and you could stop those two. But it's all public. Someone could video that and see you doing it or not doing it. But there's also the private side. As you were critiquing the Catholic faith and some of the stories in the Bible, was there any sense of an internal dialogue with a God character, sort of like saying, God, I think they're misrepresenting you, but I know I'm talking to you. I know I feel you. I feel your presence. I feel your will. I feel you delighting in me. I feel myself delighting in you. I delight in your creation in the night sky. I'm delighting in the beauty of this universe. And I feel like I've got a relationship with you. And maybe for some people, like, I feel close to you when I'm like hiking in the mountains or watching a beautiful sunset that's multicolored. But God, I want the real you, not the fake you. Can you please reveal yourself to me? Was there anything like that was going on in terms of a private relationship, or were you just from the earliest days truly becoming secular, where that God conversation wasn't part of the equation?
No, for sure it was. And there was a path. I'd say there's a journey, and there's a wonderful monologue by Julia Sweeney called Letting Go of God. And I feel like I followed a similar path. I thought, okay, it's not the Catholic God. It's not the Christian God. Well, maybe it's world pantheism. Maybe God is nature. Maybe God's this benevolent force. And you start trying to basically twist yourself into pretzels, trying to, in my case, align what you're seeing in the world with this faith or this belief system that you've been taught. My problem was, for every beautiful night sky, I also saw a lion taking down a zebra. And I saw a baby bird dying in the grass. And nature can be harsh. You know, nature can be brutal. It's red in tooth and claw, right? And so one day I just said, hey, what if I just take off this cloak? What if I just drop it on the ground and say there is no God? And then all of a sudden it's like this relief. Like I don't have to do these somersaults in my head. What if, you know, I can appreciate that night sky and that sunset and all of the beauty around me, and friendship and love and music and literature and everything that we have around us. But I don't have to attach it to this supernatural being. And what a relief that is when you finally go, I can be a good person and I can appreciate everything around me, but I don't have to. And I just walked away.
It's amazing. I'm so jealous in many ways. It's interesting that what you shared, and it made me think for a second of Family Guy, where they have that little clip that says, "Damn, nature, you scary." But it's like this was after my deconversion, but I began somehow I stumbled upon the videos where a snake like eats its prey, but in many cases it eats its prey alive and whole. And so, you know, you'd watch like a snake grabbing a frog and sort of eventually sort of being able to get the back legs down first and just kind of slowly sucking it in.
Yeah.
And you think that in a sense that poor frog is just slowly being swallowed whole. And you think, how many animals on this planet per day are being eaten alive, swallowed alive? And you think that's God's best, like that's the loving God, that's the best he could do. And of course Christians say, well, that's sin did that. I'm like, no, I don't think so. But you realize, like you said, nature really is much more cold and callous, and nature doesn't care if, you know, you're alive or dead, or if you get dementia or I get dementia. Nature doesn't care about us.
No,
it doesn't care if an asteroid.
Yeah, an asteroid.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think about. I'm jumping ahead here, so I'm sorry for doing this, but sometimes certain topics just make connections. It does bring up the question, though, of nihilism, because when you realize that you're beginning to say to yourself, there is no God and the universe doesn't care, and you could have a heart attack, you and I could have a heart attack, this afternoon, we could be dead. It's like, it's sad, it's depressing, but it's also realistic. It's what does happen to people. And you think, at the end of the day, I can try my best, but within a generation or two, no one will know my name. Certainly within 5 or 10 generations, no one will surely know my name. Even with internet archives, no one's going to know my name. It's hard. It's hard to think about the reality that, in a sense, everything we do doesn't matter. How did you, as a young person, deal with the idea of nihilism and purpose, realizing that you are admitting the universe is cold and it doesn't sound like we have this loving Father has squishy arms around us, just trying to give us this wonderful story, but it's just we're evolved animals who are in fact in a cold universe that will kill you in a heartbeat without stopping. And yet you want to have a purpose. You want to wake up and say, I'm going to seize the day and make a difference, and I'm going to make my life shine. I'm going to do something and leave the planet better than I found it, knowing that there's no ultimate accountability. There's no sense of like what you do, what Bertha does is being written in a book, and someday it's going to get out. It's going to count for something. It's like it counts for something temporarily in our generation, but especially if like an asteroid hits us all, like the Don't Look Up movie, like if that's it, like it didn't really ever matter. How do you deal with that?
Wow. Well, there's a lot of questions there. First of all, the nuns in elementary school told us that there was an angel for each of us up in the sky. I suppose it's your guardian angel. And every time you do a good thing, jots it down. Every time you do a bad thing, I suppose, like little hash marks or something. And I pictured this beautiful angel with these big white wings. Now we're going back to like 2nd or 3rd grade, right? In this beautiful wooden old podium with this beautiful old tome in front of him or her. And they're just putting these little hash marks. But anyway, what you find and what many people find disturbing, that this is it, I find refreshing. I am not at all in the least concerned that I will not be remembered past potentially my grandchildren. I don't care. It's almost a relief that the universe isn't centered around me. And one of the things that I find very disturbing about religion is when I'm with someone and we're going around the parking lot and we find a parking space and they thank the God for their parking space. I can't believe 10,000 children died today on this planet. And you think God cares about your parking space? When I see athletes doing this, the World Cup the Brazil plays tonight in Miami, and there's a lot of Brazilians here. It'll be crazy. You really think forgive me, Tim, but I think that's really arrogant. God should be worried about the children that are dying right now, or not my soccer team or whatever. So to me, I'm okay being insignificant. I'm okay being part of nature, not apart from nature. And I was in a yoga class in my 20s, and somebody had a t-shirt on. I traveled like crazy. I did seek truth. I did. Like, I took 20th century French literature at the University of Miami, and I studied all those nihilists. I studied Camus and Sartre, and, Sartre, was it Camus? Sartre, who said you might as well just kill yourself. There's nothing to live for. And I found the truth on the back of a t-shirt. It said, the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And Robert Ingersoll, he said, the time to be happy is now, the place to be happy is here, and the way to be happy is to make others so. And that's enough for me. It's enough for me. Just, I try not to do harm. And if I can do good, I do good. But I have zero qualms or concerns about not being remembered or not being important to a supernatural being. Does that make me different? I don't know.
Well, can I ask this? Do you think if you could live forever, would you want to? If it was a place of bliss and...
well, again, there's that intellectual clash in my head. Like, Santa Claus is great. And do I want to believe in Santa Claus forever? It doesn't make it true. Could I live forever if it's wonderful and bliss? Sure, I'm going to say yeah. Or maybe, I don't know. I've never posed that question to myself. I'm not scared of dying at all. What I'm scared of is yesterday we cured the first person of sickle cell anemia. Did you see that?
I know, that's awesome though.
It's awesome. CRISPR is amazing. And, I do this talk where close to half of all people who lived before the year 1800 died before their 5th birthday. And we estimate about 100 billion people lived before the year 1800. And it didn't matter if you were born in the African savannah 100,000 years ago or at the height of the French Enlightenment, half of all humans died before their 5th birthday, or close to half, depending on where you lived. And in this short 226 years, which is nothing, right, in human history, which I think you could go back 300,000, this blink of an eye, we've made so much progress. And again, God didn't care about anybody before the year 1800. I mean, sure, people mourned the loss of their children just as we do today. And, well, I have so many points. You just bring up so many good ideas. But my point is, what I'm scared of is not dying. I'm sad about missing out on the trip to Mars and the cure for pancreatic cancer and figuring out dark matter. These are the things that I'm going to be sad about missing, because things are changing so quickly now with technology.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think with all the shows that we grew up in and that are coming out, it's so easy to imagine so many beautiful things. A lot of us grew up on Star Trek and imagining a world where we're not driven by money, and you can truly live your life, and you're going to have food is as easy as push a button on the computer and it appears. And it's some beautiful stuff. But although I know Star Trek has some very bizarre storylines too that make you think there's some bad stuff coming.
I think it's going to be more like Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah. I would agree.
There's evil in the world. There always will be.
Yeah. Trump Vader. But if in terms of where you landed with that, as you began to be able to have the words and the bravery to say to yourself, I am not buying into this worldview. How did it go as you began to talk to people, especially your family, where they're probably assuming you're going to carry the baton and fall in line? My dad
was a Hitchens fan and a Dawkins fan and whatever. My brother also lost his faith probably before I did. I don't know. As a woman, I feel like I was more dutiful and I hung on a little longer. Perhaps I'm wrong.
But your mom still believed?
Yes. And just this weekend I spoke at the Free Thinkers of Central Florida community. And I brought my mom along because she's in my presentation. She got rubella in her first trimester of pregnancy. And my grandfather in 1958 opened the first box of polio vaccine that arrived in Havana, Cuba that year, that arrived ever in Cuba. And so I wanted her to see my presentation because I was featuring very, very important people. But she really doesn't know what I do for a living. And although the Center for Inquiry is more about reason and science, it's not so much about atheism. This group is. And when she walked in, they had all the little stickers and stuff, atheism and keep your theology off my biology and all this stuff I've seen 1,000 times, and I completely, for the most part, not always, but agree with everything. And she got very quiet, my mom. And she was walking around this table. And I thought, oh, gee, I actually was a little nervous because to this day, we've never really talked about it. My mom is one of those religious people that she goes to church every Sunday. She walks the walk, but she doesn't push it at all. And she's a really good person. And she's never pushed it on me after the age of 18. So we've actually never had the conversation. But I admit I was a little uncomfortable this weekend when she saw all of that. In terms of my friends, they've always kind of known. And then I just gravitated towards a more science nerdy crowd. All of my childhood friends, and I do keep in touch with a few, are still religious. Loosely, some of them are much more religious. I still go to my high school reunions, and it starts with a prayer and it ends with a prayer, and by the grace of God, and everybody's baptizing their kids and communion and marrying in churches. And I love that, I don't know how you can tell me what it is with evangelicals, but it seems to be okay. Like nobody is mean either way or judgmental either way. I've encountered a couple people, but they were not really friends. They were acquaintances that were terribly disappointed in me. But they weren't that important to me. So
I'm glad to hear that you haven't seen too much negativity from evangelicals. They're in my experience, they're monsters. They're absolute monsters.
Wow.
Do you think, just come back to your story for a second, do you think your mom thinks you're going to go to hell, or is her theology more inclusive?
I don't think she thinks that, because hers is a loving God. I think this is one of my biggest insights in life is good. God doesn't create the person creates the God. And it is in my experience when I find religious people who are good and kind, their God is good and kind. And when I encounter people who are kind of jerks, their God's a jerk. And my mom is good and kind, and her God is good and kind. And I don't think he would do that to someone who's done her best to just, I try my best to be a good person.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried. I don't think she's worried about that. I'm sure she prays for me. That's fine.
When you mentioned evangelicals, obviously they look at this whole thing as saying, they would say, you're correct. The Catholic Church isn't the bastion of truth, but we have it. We have the right interpretation. We know that it's not right to pray to the Virgin Mary. She has no power. She's not part of the divine Godhead.
The evangelicals took the only feminine divine out of it completely. Let's just make it completely masculine. At least we have the Virgin Mary, and Mary Magdalene and some feminine divine. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you ever get evangelicals trying to pull you in, or at least say, let's have the conversation as to maybe the issue isn't God, maybe you just grew up in the wrong church?
In Miami, you don't encounter too many of those. It's mainly like I'm among a very Hispanic community. I worked with someone who's an evangelical, he was a climate denier and not believe in evolution, but he never, ever, ever pushed it on you at all. We got along just fine. My only experience was in college. I took a class called, some sort of philosophy religion. I loved it. It was the teacher and maybe 6 people around the table, the professor, 6 people around the table. We'd have readings to do, and then we filled out little index cards. And there was an evangelical, there was a Jewish kid, there was me, it was a good diverse group, right? And the evangelical young man explained that if you're not saved, you're going to hell. And the Jewish boy asked him, well, you mean I'm going to hell? And the evangelical kid said, yeah. And that was like, holy cow, God, your God is not very nice. And then the Jewish kid asked, well, what about people out in Tibet or Nepal that have never even been exposed to Christian faith? Oh yeah, they're going to hell. And my comment was like, well, why are you sitting here then? You should be a missionary. At least I respect those guys. They're going over there trying to save people's souls. So how can you sit here and think that a good percentage of humanity is going to hell and not do something about it? And think that that your God you're nicer than your own God. Again, it was that rational clash for me, not so much the trauma, that I just like, this cannot be this. If this God is like this, I don't want anything to do with him. As a matter of fact, there's a great story, if I may. The last surviving Native American in Cuba, his name was Hatue. He was actually from neighboring Santo Domingo, the island of Hispaniola. And he was about to be burned at the stake by the Spanish. And by the way, there's a beer today called Hatue, because we tend to do that, right? We name football teams and beers after these guys that we killed. But Hatue is there, and he's about to be burned at the stake, and that spot in Havana is still there. And the Spanish conquistadors said, hey, do you want to be baptized? Before we kill you, do you want to be baptized? And Hatue said, what does that mean? So, of course, the Spanish, being Catholics, were saying, well, there's heaven and there's hell, and you could come here and we could go to heaven and everybody's happy and the lion lays with the lamb and all of this. And Hatue looks around and he says, are you guys going to be there? And they go, well, of course, we're good Catholics, we're good Christians, we're going to be there. And Hatue goes, well, I wish I could say it in Spanish because it's really funny. But he goes, I don't want to be baptized because I don't want to be anywhere near you people. And that is the story. So if that God does stuff like that irrational behavior, I just don't want anything to do with it.
That is so cool that you were able to put those pieces together earlier in life. I really wish I could have done so. I definitely did not. It is interesting to think about the idea that if you were to just focus on this question of is God real or isn't he? And let's say that you were inclined to conclude, I think the God of the Bible is real. I think he is an actual real God who's up in real heaven, and there is a real heaven, there is a real hell to pay, and this is all real. I think it's all real. That in that equation, the more appropriate response would not be to want that God to exist or to love that God or to be close to that God. It would be to fight that God, even if it would be a losing battle, because that God is truly a psychopath.
Wow.
You
said it. You said it, not me.
Yeah. And it's just crazy to think about. What's that?
Do you think about that now? Do you feel that way?
That I should have been trying to oppose God?
Like, yeah, or change the way he treats people who don't go to church on Sundays or who practice Buddhism instead of Christianity?
I don't think I had that foresight and ability to think through it at that time, mostly in part because of my theology leaning towards Calvinism. Are you familiar with the term Calvinism?
Sure, of course.
That was really like a good example. I've told this story before, but a good example of this is this. The last big church I was in here before my deconversion in Atlanta, it's called Perimeter Church. Atlanta has a road that goes around. It's called the Perimeter, and the church originally was right there, so they called it Perimeter Church. But in Perimeter Church, it's a Calvinist Presbyterian church, and the pastor was talking about how there's a lot of people in the church because it's like a mega church. Like, a lot of you don't realize we are a Calvinist church. We are a Presbyterian Calvinist church. You feel like we're seeker sensitive because we got these huge bands, but we are a Calvinist church. And he said, predestination.
Some of us are going to. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so exactly. Some of us are predestined to life eternal, and some of us are predestined to
predetermined, no matter how good or bad we are.
Exactly. But you in terms of like the idea of like seeing God as cold and calculating and yet completely right to be that way, and yet for us to see him as a good father. remember this one sermon he was preaching where he said, everybody, I got permission from this lady to tell the story, but she was being counseled by me. Her baby had just died, like after a year being born, a baby had died, and she was having trouble healing from this. And he said to her, ma'am, I need to tell you, you're not going to ever really be able to process this correctly and therefore eventually heal unless you get your theology right. And the theology you must get right is that your baby, like all of us, deserved to die. And that your baby was born a sinner. Sin deserves death. And it's a grace of God that any of us are given one more second of breath. And so therefore, it was a grace of God that he gave you that baby for a year. And God was fully in his rights to take that baby. But you expand that out to salvation. Like God is fully in his rights to say, I'm going to make you a vessel of honor and you a vessel of destruction. And therefore, when you look at God doing things like genocide in the Old Testament, or like the missions work you mentioned, which was my path. I went to mission school to be a Bible translator in a jungle tribal environment. But like if those people that are lost, if they end up being lost forever, for eternity, God is right to do that. He is right to create things. And there's a passage in the Bible that talks about people arguing about that issue. Like, is that really fair of God? And the question comes up, what good is it if you have a grapevine and it doesn't produce grapes? And it kind of gives like a couple examples. It's like, is it good for grapes and therefore for making juice or wine? No, it doesn't produce any grapes. It doesn't produce any good fruit. So can you turn a vine into like a big board and make a shelf out of it? No, you can't. It's a vine. It's like, so I guess it's good for nothing, right? It's like, no, it's good for one thing. You can let it dry out and it's now kindling for the fire. And they're like, that's what the lost are to God. They're kindling for the fire. They will make God's glory shine brighter. And so the idea of God being
you were told this story.
What was that?
This is in the Bible? Because I'm pretty good with the Bible, but I don't remember this story.
Yeah, the grape stories in the Bible. Yeah, I forget the exact reference, but I'll try to find it. But it's like the idea, like when you really believe that stuff, when you believe that that's your theology, that's your God, then the idea of him being a psychopath is sort of already inherent in the system. It's like he's a psychopath, but it's a paradox. Everything's a paradox. He's not really a psychopath. He's actually a good father. And the reason you think he's a psychopath is because your mind is depraved and you can't see the white hot holiness of God. But someday when you see it and you see reality through God's eyes, you will say, God, you were right to destroy those wicked sinners.
Oh my God.
I bought into that hook, line, and sinker. So I see it now as a psychopath, but back then I couldn't see it. No.
Well, two things. First of all, that's one religious perspective. And who's right? That religious perspective or the more kindler, gentler religious perspective of non-evangelicals or this whatever sect you're referring to? Secondly, I go back to my point about self-centeredness and the parking space. When I see a vine that's not producing fruit, automatically I am thinking that that vine is providing us with oxygen. That vine is providing insects with a place to live. If it's not producing fruit, it may not be producing flowers, so it may not be allowing for pollination. But like I see all of the other possibilities of that, the role that vine plays in its ecosystem, and I am not the center of that, and humans are not the center of that. So I find that story, as I find most religious stories, terribly human-centered. Yeah. And maybe it provides shade for me when I'm done gardening. It doesn't have to be fruit. And that's where my brain would have gone if one of the nuns or the priests had given me that story. There's so many other beautiful uses for a vine. It could be an inspiration for a painting or a song, or a place for a bird to put his nest. And I just feel so relieved that I am not, as Bob Marley said, I have emancipated myself from this mental slavery. And I'm a very happy person, and I don't have to worry about these things. Because I find that to say that the vine is just kindling is horrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, that verse, if anyone's looking it up, it's Ezekiel 15 is what I was referring to. Ezekiel 15 has that. But yeah, I totally agree. And it's all wrapped up in the idea of like God's the potter, we're the clay. The potter can do what he wants with this clay. But just bringing it back to your story for a second, you obviously have focused a ton since all this on science.
Yes.
Like where did science come into the equation for you in terms of being such a big piece of your shaping your worldview?
The thing is that the deeper I ask questions, right? My dad said when I was 2 years old, he was taking a nap and I sat on his chest and I said, Dad, why am I here? And I asked questions, and the deeper I went seeking those questions in religion, the more frustrated I became. The answers were not there, or the answers were not satisfying, like the kindling thing that you just explained, or why God is all knowing and all powerful, but yet not lets bad things happen. Like I just wasn't satisfied. And the deeper I went into science, that's where I found my wonder and my awe. That's where I found answers. And I'm also very comfortable not knowing something. And science is comfortable not knowing something. The best scientists are not confident, right? They try to prove themselves wrong, not right, when they set up their experiments. And so science, not only did it give me answers that religion did not, science gave me awe and wonder. And I remember I lived a year in France, and I loved visiting old churches. I love the silence of old churches, and I love stained glass windows and the sound when someone brings the pew down and it echoes across the church, and things like that. And I was teaching English. There was a Mexican woman teaching Spanish at the same school, and she was kneeled and she was praying fervently. And I remember thinking, gosh, I wish I could have that faith. Sometimes you wish you had that kind of guarantee of eternal life. It doesn't happen to me very often, but it does sometimes. But then I realized when I climbed a mountain, and when I saw a giant manta ray in Hawaii, and when I saw a tiger in India, when I saw a volcano erupt in Costa Rica, that feeling that she got that I wish I had, I did have. I just saw it when I looked at the night sky, and when I looked at a cheetah with babies. And so science gave me what religion never gave me in a much more satisfying way. So I started reading science books, and suddenly my existence made sense. Suddenly, why religion tends to have a strong man or strong God, right? And we all have to bow to him and whatever makes sense, because that, in terms of human evolution, I think democracy is not our default position. I think we have to fight for democracy every day, because a default human political condition is a strong man in a tribe and everybody does whatever he says. And so religion is just reflecting our own evolutionary history in a way.
Yeah.
So that's why I went towards science, because I found the answers that I wanted, and I found it very satisfying. And I'm also, like I said, very comfortable with the idea that science doesn't know everything yet, and we'll get there. You don't have to make shit up. It's okay that we don't know the origin of the universe, or we're still figuring out the origins of life. I'm totally okay with uncertainty.
Well said. When you began to realize, think through the ideas of evolution, what did the idea of, like, you and I are heavily evolved animals, how did that change your worldview to realize that we're so connected to the animals, both in the sense of we should obviously care about their well-being, but just in the sense of we came from them. Our instincts are animalistic. Yeah. We are in a sense part of the barbaric, savage nature. The whole damn nature you scary motif, like that's still us. And as much as consciousness has gotten us beautifully to a place where a lot of us are saying, I want to actually not be so savage. I want to care about nature. I want to care about the animals. I don't, just because I can be the top predator, I don't want to anymore. I don't want to be the top predator. I truly want to love everything around me and take care of people. But we're still from that savage background. We're still from the cold nature. How did that change and shape your worldview?
Well, I have to disagree in a way, because I think our evolution we also evolved altruism and compassion and taking care of each other. This is part of our evolutionary history. So what happened to me when I really got deeper and deeper into evolution was I realized, first of all, it explained human behavior. I loved E.O. Wilson and, sociobiology, and the chapter 2 of The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins is called The Replicators. Suddenly it was like, oh my gosh. So I had lost religion, but I was like, where do I hang my hat? And that chapter especially was just all about, this is why we act the way we are, the good and the bad. And that, even that book, The Selfish Gene, people think, oh, it's a cold, heartless, we're not selfish. It should have been, and I think he's mentioned it could have just as easily been called the altruistic gene. We take care of each other. We've gone to caves and found ancient humans, and there's this very famous story where they found the skeleton of a very, 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 very old man, and he had lost his teeth way before he died. That means somebody was chewing his food, masticating it, and putting it in his mouth. That tradition of taking care of each other is also part of nature. So I'm just realistic. Like, yes, there's some nasty stuff, and we are a murderous species, as are wolves and chimpanzees, perhaps the three most murderous species on the planet. But there's a lot of goodwill, and there's a lot of kindness and empathy. And whenever I've traveled, I've met people, strangers, who are very kind to me, and I see acts of benevolence and goodness all around me. So I think it's a misconception to think that because I don't believe in God, or because I don't believe in this sort of hierarchy of good or whatever, that I think the world is cold and heartless. I think by nature we are not just cold and heartless. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think there's both sides to it, where we came from, but also that we're not the same thing. And I love how so many of the findings are showing that, you know, humans as we think of them, and Neanderthals too, but like that we existed a lot earlier in time than we thought, to the point
and we
that
took care of each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, one of the things that bothered me as a kid is I was a huge cat lover, and now I'm a huge dog lover. There's one sitting right behind me on my chair, and there's one over here. Nice. But I was upset, like, well, that I go to heaven when I die. What about my cat? I love my cat, you know? And now I see us as this beautiful web of life, where we all came from a common ancestor. And I feel more connected to life. And I always feel like one of the most dangerous stories was God gave man dominion over the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea. And I know some people say stewardship, but it kind of gave us that tendency to just go out and take it down and destroy and take whatever we can from it. And maybe if we saw it more like we're all part of nature, not apart from nature, maybe we would have taken care of it better.
Yeah, I agree. The dominion theology across the board is so savage, both in terms of Christian nationalism, but even just climate science and the idea that God's going to destroy it all and start over. So, you know, tend it while you're here, tend the garden of God while you're here, but don't get too attached, because it's all going to burn. He's going to start over anyway. It's crazy.
And you're more likely to take care of it if I think this is it. This is all I got, right? So I wanted to make it a good place, leave it better than I did before I got here. And I know there's a lot of Christian people who feel the same way, by the way. We're kind of picking on Christians. And I never felt the need to do that, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easier for me to pick on them because I was them. I mean, I was not only one of them. I was trying to be a pastor. I went to school to be a pastor and a missionary. I went down that line. I preached many, many times in churches and soup kitchens, preached to youth groups and so forth for years, for so long. And it was my everything. So I feel like I'm, in some ways, it's like I was in this. I know how the sausage is made, so I know how to sort of reveal it. But I love to say. I'm sorry,
it was good to say that. Like Catholics, I feel like, and this is a line from Julia Sweeney, like the Bible, like, ooh, leave that book to the professionals. But you guys, man, you guys dig in. Thank you, Martin Luther. You don't need a priest to interpret that for you, which means all sorts of different interpretations, you know. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Exactly. No, it's a good point. And it was interesting learning about how Martin Luther was so anti-Semitic that he was part of, you know, the way that World War II. Yeah. Martin Luther was he tried to evangelize to the Jews of his day, and they wouldn't have it. And eventually
he said, European Jews.
He said basically, he told the Christians, drive them out of our towns. If they won't become Christians, drive them out. And that, you know, Lutheranism was embedded heavily in Nazi theology and Hitler's perspectives.
So was Darwinism, but unfortunately, like a misunderstanding of Darwinism. So I guess we could both get blamed for that one. And
Yeah.
the Catholic Church wasn't so great either. Going back, think about the
Mm.
Spanish Inquisition, which wasn't Spanish; it was European. We love to pick on those Spanish people, but
Yeah.
so yeah, they weren't great about that either. And that all comes down to tribalism, which can be explained through evolution, right?
Yeah.
Our tribe
Exactly.
gives us safety and comfort and goodness, but then people who are not in our tribe can signal danger. So we are by nature tribalists, We're going to hang out with our own soccer team and our own football team and our own religion and our own political party. And I think we need to try to break away. It's really hard to do, though, because that's part of our own instinct as humans to be tribal.
Yeah. With I meant to ask you at some point, so this is a good segue, but with Darwin, what are some of the things that you feel like a lot of us misunderstand about what Darwin was trying to say, and just about evolution, originating from Darwin or not, just how it works and what it's all about? Are there some things that you think, you all kind of understand evolution, but actually you're sort of misquoting things, or you're misunderstanding the way it worked? Is there anything that
No.
stood out to you over time?
There's two that really stand out that I have to cover a lot when I do use, I help teachers and stuff. One is, it's just a theory. That's the first one. If I had $1 for every time I heard that. And of course, the word theory in common language, like a police show, or even when scientists are talking casually, theory means hypothesis, a hunch. It's not that big a deal. So people think, it's just a theory, evolution. I always answer that when kids say that in class, like, well, do you want your doctor to wash his or her hands before they operate on you? Well, of course, Ms. Vazquez. I'm like, well, that's just a theory. You're going to jump off the roof? No. Well, the theory of gravitational attraction is just a theory. So that's the main one. In science, scientific theory, if we stick the word scientific in front of the word theory, a scientific theory is a broad explanation for something that happens in nature. And under that theory, you have laws and facts. Theories are much bigger than facts, right? And repeatedly tested hypotheses over time, in the case of evolution, over centuries, right? So that's the first big mistake that a lot of people don't get. And the other one is, I would get a lot as a teacher, I didn't come from a monkey. And that's a good, quick, what teachers would call a quick assessment, because immediately I know they don't understand evolution, right? We did not, and I say no scientist ever has said that we come from a monkey. We come from a common ancestor. So then I put my family tree on the board, and I go, this is my grandfather Daniel and my mom, and here's my cousin Danny over here and his dad, and I didn't come from Danny. We both come from my grandfather. And they go, it's like a family tree, okay? And those are, to me, the two biggest misconceptions. The other misconception that I get is there's that second, the law of thermodynamics. I don't know if you know that one, but the other one is the one about, evolution can happen because it's like a tornado going through a junkyard and building a Boeing 757. No, Dawkins actually has a book called Climbing Mount Improbable, and it's about how that happens, that's not what evolution is saying is happening. Most things don't make it right. That's a big one.
Can I ask you a quick question regarding some of this too? You're bringing up objections that I've heard to it, and a lot of Christians would bring up. And one of them is the idea that some of the stuff that has evolved, such as our eyes, could not have evolved because you would need all the pieces together for them to have come. Otherwise, it would have been sort of self-defeating earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with people who bring those kind of objections, that it would have had to kind of been created all at once as a working final machine, as opposed to just there's a piece of it that worked that eventually merged with something else that eventually adapted and changed, but that it wouldn't have worked the way it would have basically failed from the beginning if it worked
right. Well, that idea is called irreducible complexity, and it comes from Michael Behe. And greater minds than mine have explained that beautifully. One of them is Dr. Kenneth Miller. He's a professor emeritus at the Brown University, and the idea is just wrong. It's false. So what Dr. Miller, I've met him many times, and I'm such a fan. And he's a devout Catholic, by the way, goes to church every Sunday, has a wonderful book called Finding Darwin's God. I highly recommend. If you're religious and trying to come to terms with the fact that evolution really happened and there's no way around it, what he does is he explains, well, it might not have been you have to think that the original plan was not vision. The original plan might have been something else. And little by little, we built towards the eye. And what he does is he takes a mousetrap. And he shows that this mousetrap can be, if you take some pieces off, could be a keychain. It could be a tie clip. It could be, something to hold playing cards together, whatever. And that over time, the pieces built towards the use we have today, which is a mousetrap. And we have multiple examples of that in nature, like the immune system, how it works. If you look at some other animals, there are less proteins involved. And the famous one is the bacterial flagellum. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a wildly complex little wheel that spins this whip-like tail on this very basic organism. You're like, how in the world did that come to be? That was Michael Behe's example of like, oh, that can't happen. Well, let's take his theory and say, and I use the word theory, I shouldn't have done that. See how it happens? I call it, instead of theory of irreducible complexity, let's call it personal laziness or personal incredulity, right? That's because you just haven't looked for the answer. Maybe instead of just saying, oh, that can't happen, go figure it out, go to a lab and figure it out. And what they figured out is that some of the earlier organisms, they didn't use it as a wheel to turn the whip-like tail. They used it as to inject poison, like a little cilia that injected poison into surrounding organisms. So the point is, the original use of that eye, or the original use of the bacterial wheel, was not the use it is used for today in these organisms. It could have started as something else. But Kenneth Miller, look up Kenneth Miller and his mousetrap, and it's way better explained than I just did.
It's interesting. I love too how a lot of these, you're bringing up effectively the idea that a lot of the arguments that Christians would bring, they might sound good on the surface, but there is a better way to think through it. And I think what's hard for a lot of Christians is that we were so sheltered. We were only given the information by Ken Ham and the creation research kind of stuff. That was all we were given, and we were told that the well was really poisoned. We were told everything else is not just wrong; it's actually satanic. And the idea of going to a
don't even look for it, right?
The idea of going to a secular college was like, for a lot of us, was just anathema. Like you don't. There's nothing in you that needs to ever consider it a viable option to go to a secular, godless professor and say, please teach me anything, because their bias is so bad. You are going to get inherently godless, demonic doctrines woven in and presented as science. And when it takes a lot of bravery for those of us who are neck deep in it to say, that's the way I thought, but maybe there's something else going on here. It's really hard. It's really hard to do it.
But Tim, again, I feel like I'm the apologist for the Christians watching this show right now. My good friend Melanie Tresick King, you've had her on this show, was speaking to a group called Recovering from Religion, Bob Palmer. They're a good group. I've spoken with them as well. And she did something what I thought was brilliant, right? So picture a group of very self-avowed, secular, liberal people. She asked them, do you accept evolution? Of course we do. This is a sign of our tribe, right? Yes, we accept evolution. We're not like those dummy young earth creations over there. We accept evolution. And then she gave them a 10-question quiz on evolution. And we just did this again in SciCon because I thought it was so brilliant. It's a conference of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which took place in Buffalo a couple weeks ago. She gave them an evolution quiz, not a difficult one, an intro to bio for non-science majors evolution quiz. And guess what happened? They all failed it. Wow. So don't make fun of those young earth creationists that accept that the earth is 6,000 years old and have every argument to prove that to be correct, because you also hold beliefs not because you understand them, but because your tribe, those are your tribal beliefs. What you're describing, growing up in this thing that you cannot break through, it is very hard to break free. I think that's the case for all of us. Religion is just one example of that. We have to be mindful and ask ourselves a lot, why do we believe what we believe, be it a religious idea or some other belief system? Because we're all wrong about something.
Yeah.
And I think that humility, that promotion of intellectual humility, I'm sure I'm wrong about stuff, I find myself being wrong all the time, is the key to get out of a dogmatic faith or any other ideology which is perhaps harmful.
Yeah. And I think too, it's a truism that just even in general, even non-scientific things, we tend to get drawn to the party line with whatever it is that are, there might be things that we've aligned ourselves with for big reasons, but whatever else the party line tends to align with, we tend to lean that way at least. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that there are some ways in which I think that sort of to put it in a really simple way, we were fundamentalists before as Christians, and now we're fundamentalists often as atheists. And it's like to realize that we're still not necessarily open to nuance. We're not open to uncertainty, and we're also not open to saying, "I'm willing to change teams," even if like we were willing to change from Christians to agnostics or atheists, but we're still not willing to change teams based on the evidence. And it's kind of crazy. But like I've noticed it, just as a quick aside, I've noticed that in the atheist community, if a woman tends to want to choose to live like what you might call a trad wife life, that there's an assumption that she is oppressed. And there are women that truly just love that. Like I interviewed a lady maybe about a year ago. She was an atheist, and she's like, I homeschool my kids, and I love making sourdough all day. I wear long dresses. I'm an atheist. This is what I choose to do. I love it. And there's almost like an assumption of like she's oppressed by her husband and he's making her. It's like she's like, my husband loves me. He doesn't oppress me one bit. I live a trad wife life and I love it, and I'm free to do so. And it's like I think a lot of us tend to fall into these traps where like there's no way there's no other interpretation except the way my party interprets it. It's like no, there's more to it, you know.
Yeah, that's true. I even as you say it, I'm like, really? Are you sure she said that? Does you know, it's hard for me to believe that. But for sure, we all like to project tribal loyalty, and immediately what's truthful doesn't matter. It's what reflects our tribe.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Clearly today in politics, that's a big problem, because we're not listening to each other. And and I think the media and the trolls and stuff like that are playing on that human evolutionary tendency to be tribal, and we're being even more polarized.
Well, you've set me up so much for a lot of good segues here. This is exactly where I was hoping to go. Politics. Our culture seems to be moving away from science. You know, a lot of the groups in the government have been disbanded, or you know, at least diminished severely, defunded, et cetera. What are some of your major concerns for the scientific community in general, and also for just our cultural understanding? And I'm not talking about just the blatant stuff like let's put the 10 Commandments on the wall of the elementary school, but like just the way that we're sort of basically moving towards 1984. We're dumbing ourselves down on purpose, and we're rejoicing in it. We're so glad that we're so stupid as a culture. And it's like, we don't have to do this to ourselves.
No. And for sure it's profit.
Yeah.
It's for profit. RFK makes money. I noticed the vaccines he hates the most are the vaccines that cure cancer. And I think he's trying to sell alternative treatments. But as July 4th approaches, I think I'm going to take your question, change it slightly. When I'm asked what I'm most proud of as an American is the space program, public education, and scientific research. It's amazing what America has done, what the United States has done in these three fields. Am I nervous about scientific research? No, because those scientists are moving to Europe. And Europe is like, come on over, man. Do it here. Canada, other countries. So I'm not as worried about losing that scientific research and the future discoveries. I'm just kind of sad that it's not going to happen here, because I'm very proud of the American spirit. We try things, right? We're not in little boxes when it comes to science and things like that. We're not scared to try new things and ask different questions and take an old idea and go in a completely different direction. I think that's a very American ideal. And I'm sad that it's going to go elsewhere, but it'll happen elsewhere. You know, I think there's a huge breakthrough in pancreatic cancer in Spain. There's breakthroughs in China and India. This is not going to happen here.
This is sort of a silly question, but have you ever had someone who is just like hardcore 6,000 years old, you know, creationists, maybe even verging on Earth, the Earth is flat, in the center of the universe? Have you ever had any of those people approach you and try to debate you? And what do you do, or what would you do if someone did?
They do.
It's just sort of off the deep end.
They have. Actually, every year I'm invited by a wonderful group, by their pastor. They're young Earth creationist high schoolers. And they are the most polite group of high schoolers you've ever met. And they try to debate me. Man, the minute that evolution slide goes up, they're like, they come up with their dukes up, right? I know that my facts aren't going to change minds. Facts don't change minds. What change minds are anecdotal stories, shared values. So I ask questions, and I'm just planting a seed. I know I'm not going to change their mind, and they're not going to change mine. Again, we evolved around that campfire at night, right? Telling each other stories, protecting ourselves from the predators with that fire in the center. And I think anecdotes and stories change minds and shared values. So I never say, no, the earth isn't flat. Just why do you think that? I'm sure that belief is tied to a bunch of other beliefs, you know? So you can't just pick that one belief out of their head like a toothpick. You have to figure out what that whole web of belief, and you'll be tugging on different aspects of their entire belief system. It's not going to happen overnight. A lot of people do it better than me. There's a guy named Anthony Magnabosco. Have you had him on?
Yep. I haven't had him on, but I know who you mean, yeah.
So he has a whole training it's called street epistemology, and it trains people to ask questions and listen. I think that's what most people want. Surely mocking isn't going to do it. And some of my fellow atheists or secular people tend to mock. And I'm not going to change my mind if you call me stupid. You know?
Well, I love how you approach it. And it's so hard for me in some ways to not want to get involved with some of those discussions. But I think part of me too realizes, I think you're alluding to this, but also just to say it in my words, they're just not ready. Like, they're just not ready to escape. I mean, some people, I look at myself, it took me 43 years to see this differently. Why do I expect them to change their minds after one conversation or after a year's worth of debates? If it took me 43 years, it might take them a minute. And what's hard though is I hate the fact that while you sort of have to just let people believe these lies if they're going to believe them, what hurts to me is the children. And I'm using this as a bit of a statement, but also a segue, because I've got four young kids between age 6 and 11. So, you know, young children and their minds being so impressionable is near and dear to my heart. But you have written a book. And by the way, everybody, I think I forgot to mention this. There's a bunch of links beneath this video for connecting with Bertha. She's got some websites and also some Facebook pages that are related to them. But like tieseducation.org, sciencesaves.org, and generationskeptics.org. But also a link for a book. And the book, it's called What Teachers Want to Know About Teaching Climate Change, an Educator's Guide to Nurturing Hope and Resilience. It's for grades K through 12. It's written by you and two others. But you're giving people a lot of, you know, tools. Teachers you're giving them tools to be able to directly address children. What is that book like? What did that book mean to you, and sort of what's your passion for trying to help kids not get heavily indoctrinated and to actually have a fighting chance at reality?
Yeah, it's true, because the two books I've written were the subjects I was most passionate about teaching, which is evolution and climate change. The editor of that climate change book, one of the most wonderful people I've ever worked with on any project, allowed me to dedicate an entire chapter to the fact that it's not about facts, it's about a belief system. And just going back to religion a little bit, when you say to someone, oh, God doesn't exist, there's a whole lot around that belief that you're really disturbing and perhaps causing a great amount of pain. It might be that community that brings food around, right, when someone passes away in that house, or takes care of you when you're sick, or it's the people you hang out with on a Sunday. So you're destroying not just that one belief, you're affecting a lot about that person. So the chapter is wonderful because it promotes the idea of, like, climate change denial is more tied to your political party than it is to understanding the facts. So how do we break through to these kids that don't accept it? First, how do you make them comfortable? But secondly, how do you slowly break it through? It's not going to be a graph. It's not going to be data. It's going to be understanding where they come from. Do they not accept climate change because of the potential economic fallout of their family? Like maybe they work in the oil industry or something like that. Is it because they just don't want to go through, it's hard work to recycle and to try to save electricity and all these other things, so figure out why they don't accept it, and then maybe you can work more on changing their minds. And so, and the book is mainly about, first of all, we insisted on having a lot of success stories, and a lot of the chapters are about giving kids agency, because otherwise, I mean, you go run, bury your head in the sand. It's a scary thing what's happening. I saw today in France, it's the highest numbers ever recorded for today. Europe is under major heat wave right now. And so giving them agency, small things that they can do, or great things, because some kids do pretty darn amazing things. We saved $52,000 in my school in one calendar year, just doing things like turning the computers off at the end of the day and putting smart thermostats in the cafeteria and the auditorium. Just small things that make you part of the solution as opposed to the problem, that are helpful. So it was a book close to my heart, and I dedicated it to my son because he's studying environmental science, and he's really into agroforestry and wants to make a difference. So I taught so many wonderful kids that felt that way about wanting to leave a better place. Kids are, people are always bashing, oh, kids these days. And yes, I am concerned with cell phones and social media, but I saw a lot of good in my class too. And so I don't know if I answered your question correct. Was that what?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
No prescription here for how you answer it. That's really good stuff. Well, can I ask, I want to go in a second to our comments. I appreciate you all being patient with me. Those of you that have commented, we'll read through them quickly here before we wrap up. But just curious, what's on your heart for the future? You obviously are very, very, very knowledgeable. You're very talented. You're very driven. And you have a lot of great background. You sort of could probably hit the ground running on anything you put your mind to do. What is on your heart to do from this point with the skills and talents and interests you have?
Well, I love my job. Oh my gosh, I love what I do. And my boss, who's Robin Blumner, she just lets me do what I want to do. And I have so much independence, and I tried so many different things. And the evolution stuff is the evolution resources, which you find on the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Science. Everything is free and downloadable, very user-friendly. That's being used a lot, and evolution standards are improving across the country. I did a study in 2017, and I did a study last year. Only 1 or 2 states actually went down. The majority states went from a grade of F to a grade of A. So I feel that that program is kind of moving along on its own wonderfully. It's the other 2 programs I want to focus on. Science Saves is all about promoting science appreciation. And when you're promoting science appreciation, you're promoting gratitude, which is such a powerful, healthy emotion. We know it's tied to well-being, physical and mental well-being. So I love promoting that program. And what I've done is created lessons that might cover artificial hearts or the cholera epidemic in the mid-1800s in London, but tied to current science standards. So my push is that program. We have a high school scholarship where we give away $15,000 every year to high school seniors who tell us how science has improved their lives or the lives of someone they know. And then the third program is called Generation Skeptics. The motto is don't believe what you believe. And that my greatest concern right now is there's always been misinformation, but now it's just so easy to get to it. And we all have a tendency to believe what we want to believe. And that program is about not just evaluating the source of or the claim that you're talking about, evaluating how you are receiving it. So if I see something, anti-Trump, let's say, let's go straight into the politics. I want to believe it because I'm not a big fan. But it might not be true. So whenever you see something that you really, really want to believe, like that comment he made about if I ever run for president, I'll run as a Republican because they're the dumbest group of voters. He never said that. But if you are anti-Trump, you're going to believe it. You're not going to question it. So the more likely you are to believe something, the more you want to believe something, the more you should stop and check the information. No one is protecting us from all of this misinformation. We are the only ones protecting ourselves, and we have a tendency to believe what we want to believe and disregard what we don't want to believe, right? So my passion right now is to get this program, which is not exactly aligned with school standards. It is like critical thinking, and that evaluating claims and sources is taught pretty darn well. But the idea of also evaluating your own biases and how your lived experiences affect what you believe, we absolutely need this right now. Speaking of, there's this great cartoon, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They're riding along and suddenly misinformation comes along. He's on a horse and he's got a cell phone, and the other four are like, who are you? And it's the fifth horseman of the apocalypse. And it plays right into our tendency to be tribal and have biases and hate the other team. And I hate how polarized we are. And when I hang out with people of different political ideologies in person, they're not as bad as you make them out to be when you're not around them.
Yeah.
So that is my passion right now, is to really promote Generation Skeptics and Science Saves.
That's awesome. And again, everyone, all these links are beneath the video, so please do check them out. Great stuff. I love it. Well, I want to take a quick minute and read our comments. And if you could be thinking, Bertha, about, of course, number one, anything that you wanted to share that's on your heart today that we didn't get to, but also, I sort of asked this a lot, but if you were to meet somebody who's heavily a Catholic, maybe, going back to your background, or even an evangelical, and they're just like, I don't know, like, I see what you mean about evolution. I see the science and it appeals to me, but boy, it feels like my worlds are colliding, and I can't go back, but I can't go forward. This is just a dark situation. I'm so disturbed by both sides. I'm disturbed by what I see in Christianity, but I'm disturbed by atheism or whatever. Neither one seems like a good outcome, and they're struggling. What would you say to somebody who's deconstructing but is really struggling with it? But let me just read some comments here real quick, and then we'll bring this to a close. And thank you all for being here. Appreciate your everyone's support. Mark Richter over in the UK. I guess you're going through the heat wave, Mark. Hope you're doing okay with the heat. Thanks for being here. And Susanna in Scotland. I know it's hot over there too, so hang in there. I wish we could send you our air conditioners. I know a lot of the UK does not have air conditioners, so I'm sorry. Great to see you all. And Susanna says, wow, amazing description of your life's journey, Bertha. Love your hobbies to avoid dementia. Yeah. Awesome. Alan, great to see you here. Thank you so much. Well done, Bertha. I just blindly accepted and followed, sadly. Yeah.
Past tense, it looks like. Her verbs are in past tense there.
Yep. Susanna has escaped. She's free. She's done a short, actually, on this channel, but we're eventually going to do a whole interview with Susanna. She's awesome. And she's doing a great job trying to raise some kids over there in Scotland. And she's got a great heart. And someday we'll hear her full story. But I appreciate her encouragement on the channel. Winrose, great to see you. I cannot believe you're bringing up God killing the animals. I just thought about that 2 days ago. Yeah, he killed all the animals. He drowned them. Yeah, let alone.
Yeah, look, this guy is my constant companion.
Oh.
As a child, I just loved animals so much. I can't believe he just drowned them all because of some supposed misbehavior.
What breed is that? And what's your dog's name?
He's a Manchester Terrier.
Okay.
Speaking of England.
Yeah, nice, very nice. A little bit more here from the same person. When Rose going on saying, and I just lost my Rosie, my Pomeranian. I'm so beside myself knowing he killed and drowned all the animals. I'm so sorry. That's very sad.
But he didn't. It's just a story.
Yep, exactly. You know what's interesting too about that stuff is that it's not just the idea that that guy would be bad, and also it's not just that it's not really real. It's a story, but also it's a heavily edited story. The original story was he wasn't trying to kill people. He had to kill people. He was trying to get to the giants, the Nephilim. You're familiar with that?
Yes, the giants.
The original story was in Enoch. The Watchers, the bad angels, decided to come down and copulate with human women. They had giants as their offspring, and God said, "Screw this! I cannot have this. These giants are doing terrible things. They're eating people. Whatever. They're demonic. I'm going to kill them all, and I'm going to drown everybody and start over." And that way, the giants. Like as a Christian, I never grew up hearing that the flood was about killing the giants.
And it, you go back several other religions to like Gilgamesh and stuff. It wasn't even a Judeo-Christian idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So many iterations of it all.
I know we're doing comments, but there's something that I hesitate telling Catholics because I know it'll like, but Catholics, even when I was in school, I remember a priest telling me these stories. It was called epic history to them. It wasn't real. We don't take the Bible literally. We are not Baptists. We don't take the Bible literally. And then he brought up Adam and Eve and how that's just a creation myth and it helps us understand the world and da-da-da-da-da. And I raised my hand and I said, Father McCraner, all the priests were Irish. Jesus came to absolve us of our original sin. If Adam and Eve never existed, there was no original sin. Now you're telling me this is epic history. It never really happened. And why did Jesus come? You do that to a Catholic and it's going to like go boom. You're like, oh my God, it's true. Jesus came to save us of the sin of Adam and Eve, but we don't actually believe Adam and Eve is real. So why did Jesus come? I've only tried it once and I saw her heartbreak. I saw the pain in her face and I've never done it again.
Wow, that's awesome. I would also add to that, I love thinking through the idea of like, would even if you were to take for granted that it did happen, which is a big for granted to take, but if it had happened that way, just taking it to the absurd conclusion, like if you had a house, your own house, and you happen to hear that there were, you live near a zoo and there were animals that had escaped, and there was a really good chance that there was a leopard and a lion or a dangerous viper out there that could kill your kids in a heartbeat, and your fence wasn't that strong or you didn't have a fence at all, and you're like, hey kids, go play on the swings. Like, would you be a good parent or bad parent? And if you knew in advance, like someone had a crystal ball and could see my kids are about to be attacked by a tiger, what parent would send their kids to such a garden? And yet basically you have to conclude Yahweh framed his own children. He basically set them up to fail and to die. And he's like, what kind of daddy is that? It's sick. It's really sick.
Gosh, anyway. That must have been hard to come to terms with that as a recently deconverted evangelical. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not super recent. I was back in 2019. I've got about 7 years of distance from it, but it was hard. It was hard. I think too, just the idea that you just, for Christians that are like Christmas and Easter Christians, it's probably difficult, but it's not insurmountable. For Christians where it's your everything, I mean, it's truly your everything. And I know it's trauma, even if you loved it, and I did, it's still traumatic. It still devastated your identity and your worldview. It still killed the real you. But I did love it. I loved Jesus. Jesus was my everything. God was my everything. I loved the Bible. I was willing to do anything, and I could not get enough of it. I could not. It wasn't like a religion. It was a true relationship. And I was working on a huge 1,000-page prayer book right before I deconverted. I was working on a 1,000-page worldview book. I had memorized huge chunks of the Bible, thousands of verses. Again, studying to be a pastor and a missionary. I wanted to translate the Bible in a jungle environment and plant a tribal church, and I started to move in that direction. It was my everything to reach the lost. The only thing that mattered to me was that sharing the gospel, bringing people, of course, to the kingdom, bringing God glory in everything, and planting a church so that more believers could worship God and we could all eventually be in His presence. And so heaven meant the world to me. People, I sometimes interview people where they say, "Oh, I was a Christian, but heaven sounded boring." It's like, you don't understand the glories that we were promised. The idea of heaven getting boring in eternity, like, what if you could spend 1 trillion years and at the end of it, it felt like a second? Like, you don't think the God of the universe can make timelessness and eternity feel okay? He's all powerful. He can make you quite happy. And C.S. Lewis, I was very much addicted to C.S. Lewis's works, as were most Christians in my circles. He talks about I think it's maybe I think it's the book The Great Divorce, but I forget which book exactly. But oh no, I'm sorry, I'm mixing my books. In Narnia, this Narnia Chronicles.
Yeah, we read those.
You read this, the very last book. He says that there's a new Narnia, a real Narnia, and that this is the Narnia you've been in is just like the fake one. And he said, you're about to enter a story, like you've been in a story, but you're about to enter a story where there's endless new chapters, and every chapter gets better than the last, and it will never stop getting better. And you think this is as good as it could possibly get. This is pure bliss, and the next chapter will be exponentially better. And like that was my everything. And I talked to God nonstop. I talked to Jesus, and to leave that, it's weird and it hurts. And I still want to go to heaven. I wish it were real. I know it's not, but I wish it were.
I would have been like, well, how do you know that? You don't know any more than I do. You don't know what happens after death any more than I do. So how do you know that? That's where I would have been as a kid, saying, like, I don't know why there's no reason you know that better than I do.
Yeah, and that's the right perspective, but it's very presuppositional. You're familiar with presuppositional apologetics? Mm-hmm. There's certain things you have to take for granted, or reality becomes so chaotic and nonsensical that it just destroys itself. You have to assume there's a God. You have to assume He's communicated. All that, you have to assume that the book is divine. So it's nonstop assumptions, and then all the extrapolations from there. But you can't really argue with people that are willing to say, I presuppose, and my presuppositions are in fact rock solid. There's no way to talk to them. Mm-hmm. Toto, now great to see you. Susanna, again, I actually didn't see it from the losing side. I just was amazed that He saved some with His grace. Of course, I see it now. Yeah. Mark, we're so sorry for your dog's passing. Hope you're able to heal from that. I'm so sorry. I know they become our best friends. I don't have any pets right now. I've had pets in the past, but we're aiming for that. My kids are begging me for a dog, so we'll see if we can get one.
Get a dog.
I'm trying. Life's been upside down for a few years, but we're getting close. We're getting close.
They're angels without wings. God said, I will send them without wings, so no one will know they are angels.
Exactly. And in many ways, they bring out the best in us. You think how many dogs are super great, more gracious than humans to humans that deserve to not have a dog's love anymore, and the dog just loves them anyway. They teach us a lot about grace and kindness. Mark says, Susanna, amazing how we took it as it was presented, but you do as a kid. Yeah, exactly. Finite Atheist says God killed more people than a Mortal Kombat movie. Yep.
There's a book I have, God Hates You, Hate Him Back, and it counts the number of people killed by Satan and the number of people killed by God, and it's not even close. Yeah, I've seen those illustrations before too. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that, and a lot of those ancient stories, about the devil, doing bad things. Originally, we're not even sure that some of those stories were the devil. Like, for example, in the book of Job, that may not have been the devil as we think. Yeah, God gave him permission, right? He goes, go ahead, try to tempt the guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mark says psycho God for sure. This God is the role model for Christian nationalism. Yeah. And as I like to say, if you believe monstrous thoughts long enough, it turns you into a monster, and it really does. We see it with MAGA. Wish I had just walked away. Yeah, I wish so too. Philip says there is a moral argument which claims God is the ultimate standard of morality. Now I would consider buying that if we were all created perfectly good, and perfection cannot beget imperfection. Yeah. I mean, I know how the Christians say it, but yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for being here, Philip. Mark says the meaning of life is to give life meaning.
Yep. T-shirt, yoga class.
Yep. Great to see you, Jade. And thanks so much for being here. Jade says, I think the show The Good Place plays with this idea of living forever in a really interesting way. I've seen a part of that, but not the whole thing. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm. It's good.
Good. Okay. I need to get on that at some point. Let's see here. Mark says, I love the way she thinks and talks.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Appreciate that. I love having people like you on the channel who can help us, take our thoughts to the next level. As they say, when you think better, you do better. Laura says, I feel privileged to be able to do strength training. When I've done a strength training workout in the sun, I feel blissful for a little while, and there are no questions bothering me at that time.
That's true. Exercise definitely does that for me too. Yep. Except the sun right now, let's see, it's 91 degrees, so maybe not in the sun specifically. Yeah. But I totally agree with that. You have a lot on your mind, and you go out and you play tennis or go to the gym, and you feel a lot better.
Yeah, and get literally and metaphorically grounded. It's good stuff. As a father of 4 small children, I would say that is probably one of the biggest needs in my life, is to figure out how to find that balance and to take care of my self-care. Is so hard, is it?
Yeah.
In some parts of life. I'm not saying just parenting, just a lot of parts of life. Self-care just goes out the window. It's hard, sad. Mark says, Laura, so good to find the real things that bring peace, not the false peace of the gospel. Yeah.
Yes. But that reminds me, somebody said, well, how can you live not believing in God? And I said, well, I have music, and I have love, and I have literature, and I have nature, and there's so many other things that can bring you peace and joy and awe and wonder that I've never really worried about that.
Yeah. I've got an aunt out in Boulder, Colorado, who's not really Christian at all. I think she's agnostic or atheist, but she says, her church is just walking her dogs in the Rocky Mountains. Like that's beauty to her. It really is true.
Agreed.
Jade says, God doesn't create the person creates the God. I love that. Thank you.
Yes, which that explains really good Christians. Their God is a representation of them. And I've always found that to be true. And then you meet people who aren't that nice, and their God isn't very nice. Yeah. Oh, that's what it is. It's the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a psychopath as your hero in the story, your savior and your hero character, it's hard to avoid becoming a psychopath yourself. It's sad. Helps me make sense of some of my loved ones who still believe. Yeah. Laura says, science gave me awe and wonder. Love this.
Yeah. And it answered questions that religion didn't for me. The deeper I went, the more answers I got, as opposed to the more frustrated I became.
Yeah. You don't have to make shit up. Yep, exactly.
To love the world, right? To be happy. And I just, all those mental chains just fell away. And I thought, wow, this is fine. I don't need all of this to enjoy my life.
I've often thought too that it's just to use a different illustration. Christianity messes with your mind a lot, and it's when you're in it and then you escape it, you have so many feelings and emotions about what you went through, but you also kind of miss the mutual camaraderie, the community, the certainty, the sense of I'm going to go somewhere, and there's a story, someone's writing my life story, and it's going to be beautiful, even if it's dark for a while. It's going to get better because he's got me in his, the palm of his hands, and you miss all that. But at the same time, like, to use an illustration, if you walked by this bum on the street who said, hey, I'm actually really, really rich, like I'm filthy rich, and I really want to give my money away, and I'm going to give you a check for $1 billion, and I want you to do something. Hold it in your desk drawer for a while, whatever, 6 months, a year, but then go cash it. And I promise you, like, please do good with it. But I want you to also just give your family lots of great vacations. Just live it up. I want your life to be beautiful. And you think, oh my goodness, I've got $1 billion check here, and you put it to the side till the allotted day, and then you go to cash it, and the banker says, I'm sorry to tell you this if you didn't already know it, but that guy just stole somebody's checks. These have been bum checks for forever. There's nothing here. And you think to yourself, wow, like I thought I was so rich, and now I'm so poor. And you're like, no, you're not poor. You got sold a bill of goods. But what if you could imagine if you just never, like, what if you walked on the other side of the street and you never met that guy? He never gave you a bad check. You wouldn't be wringing your hands saying, oh my goodness, I had so much and now I lost it. You'd just be living your life. You'd look up at the night sky. Like, you look up at the night sky and you wouldn't think, oh, praise Jesus for these stars and this sunset. You just look up and say, wow, that's beautiful. I can see the artisticness of it, but I'm not saying it's artistic, therefore the artist is Yahweh, or the Bible is how it explains it all. You just think this is a beautiful night sky and just soak it up as a poet.
Yeah.
And as a fellow artist. And so many of the things that we feel like we've lost so much, you didn't lose them. You have to add them.
Yeah, you're giving me a lot of perspective, Tim, because I think my journey is my church. It wasn't this intense. And I can see now why you feel a tremendous loss when I never really felt that big a loss. And I didn't lose any friends, and I was never really concerned about hell and sin. And so it could really sink its teeth into you, makes it much harder to leave.
Yeah. And religious trauma really comes into play for a lot of people.
I mean, sorry, my elementary school priest was accused of sexual molestation of children. And my high school principal, who I played tennis with every Saturday for 2 years, was also accused of sexual molestation with children. And that is something that I think all of us, not just Catholics, I mean, we're known for it, but everybody, if you go, everybody's got that going on. That might be one of the biggest letdowns and trauma for me, because I like these guys and I had great teachers, and I had the nuns. I love the nuns. I even spent the night in the convent once in 8th grade for a newspaper article for the paper. And I don't feel that type of betrayal was probably one of the worst parts about it for me. And if a public school teacher does that, the school system does not protect them. They call the police. So I blame the Catholic Church for that, because they didn't call the police. They tried to take care of it internally and just passed it on to the next parish.
Yeah.
But so that might be the extent of my anger and trauma.
Yeah. I think too, there's some groups that I've seen too that are more intense in the sense of how much they shun you.
Yes. And I never felt that. My mom wanted my son to be baptized. I don't believe it's just a little water on the kid's head. I was past the whole excommunication thing at that point. And I asked the priest to do it. And he said, sure. And he knew I wasn't a religious person, and my husband was never a religious person. I never felt that shunning that I think a lot of you guys feel. That must be terrible to be. That's why people keep it quiet, right? And they keep going to church and they keep praying. They keep being a pastor, because they're so scared of losing that community.
Yeah.
So that must be very hard. I'm really empathetic about that.
Yeah, I've interviewed a number of JWs, Jehovah's Witnesses, over the years, and some of those they're so intense. They can't talk to people. And I grew up near Amish country in Pennsylvania. I haven't ever interviewed an Amish person, but they're obviously known for their shunning, and it's crazy some of the stories you hear.
My husband's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay, gotcha.
He's there right now. So I've met some Amish people.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be up there. My kids and I'll be driving up, and we'll be there this weekend. So looking forward to seeing my mom. She lives right there in the heart of it. So
hey, good cheese, good corn, good vegetables.
That's where I went to school. I went to Lancaster Bible College.
No way. Oh my goodness. I tell my husband.
Yep. I was trying to be a preacher boy, as they say.
He did not go to Lancaster Bible College.
Okay. Was he Millersville or?
Yes, he went to Millersville. And the funny thing is that, we didn't raise our son religious at all. And I'm sitting at dinner and I'm telling the story of Abraham or Adam and Eve, or who's that guy who tells the guys at his door to take his tear? Don't get these strangers. Take my daughter.
Lot?
Yeah, that is awful. Awful story. Lot, yes. And I'm telling my son these stories, and my husband is fascinated along with my son. I realize he never heard any of these things either. I'm telling these stories to two people who've never heard these stories, like Jonah and being in the desert for 40 days and Satan tempting you. And I grew up with all of that. And I think it's important to know those stories too, by the way, for literature and things like that.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, for sure. It is nice to realize that some kids are going to grow up just like unaware of so much that gave us so much trauma. But anyway,
Jade and I need to go out and have a beer together.
Yeah,
totally get it, Jade. Where do you live?
Absolutely. Jade says, this is so true. Science was always way more fascinating to me. I like knowing why, and the Bible never really satisfied that curiosity. Yeah.
And I stress again the need that I'm okay not knowing. This making it up because something has to be there. I'm like, why? I just don't know the answer. It's okay. We'll figure it out one day. Or not. I don't know.
Yeah. I love thinking about the ideas. This is a bit of a segue or a divergence, but I love just, in a non-scientific sense, just daydreaming about what reality really is. Even if it's depressing. Like I heard somebody say once, this whole universe might be a drop in somebody's watering can.
Mm-hmm.
How would you know? How would you
all
know?
the way down.
Like, and it's just it. Or we could literally be inside of a living cell. We might be, this universe might be a cell in somebody's body. It's like, how would you know? It's crazy to think about the options. Anyway, Sunshine, Kenya, Ezekiel 15. Yeah, the divine.
Thank you. I have my Catholic Bible here from grade school right over there. It's called The Way, and I'm gonna look that up.
This is the way.
God, that darn vine, that poor vine. It's like a woman that can't bear children, and you're saying all she is kindling. Like, she can be a wonderful contribution. She could give wonderful things to society.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Well, that's my analogy.
Well, it's interesting. First Timothy does say that. First Timothy says the woman will be saved. The woman was the first one to transgress, but she'll be saved through childbearing. Directly says that she can be saved by having children. And the other parallel passage to Ephesians, or to Ezekiel 15, there's Romans 9 talks about the potter and the clay. And there's another verse somewhere in the Old Testament that talks about, in a little different sense, but in a sort of a application sense, it talks about how God will someday trample on those. He will trample on his enemies, and we will see just rivers of blood. And it says we will rejoice that he is destroying his enemies.
And unruly children should be killed and all. Actually, as a Catholic, you don't really read the Bible that much. You leave it again, like I said, to the professionals. I am fascinated by how Protestants know so many chapters and verses and things.
Yeah, we read it all, and our cognitive dissonance goes through the roof.
Right.
There's a verse, I think, in the Psalms that says how blessed will be those who dash your enemies' children against the rocks.
Yeah. I think that's why they made it in Latin for so long and didn't let anybody read it, because it's yikes. There's some nasty stuff in there, New Testament included.
Yeah. MSI, great to see you. Very true. Bias is real, for sure. Laura says, thank you, Bertha, for bringing up atheist humility.
Yes, Laura. And I came into the atheist community and found the same sort of arrogance, not all the time, but I found just as many good people in my Catholic community than my atheist community, but I found just as many people that I rather not hang out with. And it's not exclusive. It's a human thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mark says, it's true. I need to stop mocking the Christian worldview. I know it's my way of slapping my own forehead for being blind myself for so long, but kindness wins hearts.
The Bible says that a kind word turns away wrath.
Yeah.
I have no clue what chapter and verse that is, but I know it's in there.
Yeah, I think that's in Proverbs. But I do just want to make a quick comment about this, because everyone knows I make fun of Christians a lot on this channel, and there's times that I'm aggressive. And I want to make this point. We need to be obviously very gentle in our one-on-one conversations with people. We're not trying to piss off individuals. But I think there's a point to say that absurd ideas deserve to be mocked. And one of the best parts of my deconstruction was listening to someone like Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews, if you know those names.
Sure.
Just tearing things apart and saying things like, I can write a better Bible in 1 second. Just don't own slaves. Bam, your Bible's better.
And I can make a better 10 Commandments, no question.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like there's reasons to mock it. It's not like we want to be in jackasses, but I think sometimes the absurdities do help people say, yeah, that does sound weird. You're right. And I mean, for me, like, it really hit me not about the destructive stuff, but just the ritual of communion, the Eucharist, thinking when you look at the Greco-Roman mystery cults, with Dionysius, how they would celebrate the idea of eating flesh and drinking blood. And you're like, so even though I'm a Protestant, I'm not Catholic, so we don't believe in transubstantiation, but we're still symbolizing the idea of eating a dead man's body, drinking a dead man's blood. Like, when you step back, you're like, that's really weird. And we believe in a God.
It's just so Bronze Age.
Yeah. And a God who wants to cut off of little boys' penises, it's like, that's really weird. Circumcision's so fucked up.
And
like the fact that we
suck it off with their mouth, that's like, yeah.
Ugh. And they just like, where does this stuff, how do we not see that it's absurd? How do we not see it? But we don't.
But sorry, Tim, you're not mocking people, you're mocking ideas, or you're questioning ideas. And we should be able, any idea not allowed to be held to questioning, and then we've got a problem. I'll mock your religious ideas all day long. It doesn't seem to me like you're mocking individuals. You're mocking their ideas or questioning or challenging them. I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and certainly mocking, like Mark said, our own selves, saying I once was blind, but now I see, and I was not just blind, I was perpetuating the blindness. But yeah, we're certainly saying
So
I was
Mark,
wrong too.
Mark here can continue to challenge that Christian worldview.
Yeah, exactly. NYC says some climate change deniers think evolution is only a theory since it's referred to the theory of evolution, but in science, a fact is an observable objective reality, and a theory is a comprehensive framework of ideas that explains those facts. It's a fact that organisms change over time. Evolutionary theory explains how and why this happens.
You got to get that person on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well said.
For sure. Mark says, I think we're all completely wrapped in concentration listening to Bertha. Yes, absolutely. You're doing.
You know what? You know what? I taught middle school for 34 years. Wow. So you try to keep those kids in rapt attention for 90
I know. My oldest son is just about to jump into middle school here in a month.
Have fun with
here
that.
In Georgia, and yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so a lot of hands-on. You have to either be really mean or make them think you're just a little bit crazy. And the second one is so much more fun.
Exactly. Yeah, I had a middle school. No, it wasn't middle school. It was early high school. But I had an early high school teacher for geometry, Mr. Ashley. And Mr. Ashley, he would wear suits and bow ties all the time. He didn't have to. He could have worn just a regular polo shirt. He wore a suit and a bow tie every day. And he would do the proofs and so forth for the geometry questions. And when he turned, like, he'd be on the board with his back to us, showing us how to do it, and he would be there for 10 minutes, and he'd turn around when he was done and be like, you could see his eyes sparkling. He's like, "Isn't that awesome?"
Yeah.
Like, I could take this and take 200 steps and figure out what the length of that angle. He's like, "This is crazy."
I love that. It made so much sense to me. I love, for example, photosynthesis. Oh my God! I ask kids, I start with, "What is a tree made of?" And they'll tell you the dirt surrounding the tree and the leaves and like, no, a tree is made of air. Think about it. A tree takes carbon dioxide and with the help of the sun's energy, turns that carbon dioxide into glucose. A tree is made of air. And that's not biblical. That's not a religious idea. That is actually true. It's way cooler than anything I ever read in religion class or in the Bible. Sorry.
Yeah. The earth. It's once you have eyes to just enjoy the earth as it is. It's quite a cool journey. It's weird. There's so much of us that wants to say, there's design, therefore there's a designer. There's art, therefore there's an artist. There's order, therefore there's someone that put it in order. The things are in motion.
The watch.
Yeah.
The watchmaker.
Yeah. There's something in motion, therefore someone had to put it in motion. And it's like, you get into the God of the gaps there pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Someone who calls themselves Christian asked me what utility you get out of these podcasts. I suppose the thinking behind it is you either believe or you don't. And it's, believe what exactly? Yeah, by the way, I believe in God and don't believe at the same time. That age-old question is cognitively meaningless. It's akin to asking, do you believe in the number 4? It's empty and devoid of any content. Yeah, I'm not sure what I would answer that, Philip, but yeah, I definitely, I'm so glad that I'm free from their thoughts. And the thing about most versions of Christianity that I'm from is it's exclusive. You have to believe the Bible and their interpretation of it, or you're basically demonic and headed to hell. You're in falsehood. To be free of that, I remember when I was in my church growing up, there was this one guy that really pushed our church elders to present Ken Ham videos in Sunday school. And there was this one guy in the church who said, I'm kind of okay with it, but I'm also like, I'm not okay with how Ken Ham mocks everyone who doesn't agree with him. And it was one of the first times I really thought about, like, how we come across as jerks, as Christians. But he really is like, this isn't, even if you want to believe in this stuff, like he's so mean to people. Like, is that the way we want to be as Christians? And he would mock nonstop anybody that didn't believe in young earth creation. But it's like, there really is an exclusivity and a pride there, and a we're right and you're wrong, and we know that you're going to burn. And when you get people that are that seduced and that addicted and that blind, it's like, it's really hard to deal with them. So I'm so glad I'm not stuck in that anymore, because life can be beautiful, but it's not beautiful when you have such a locked in perspective. But
what about the idea, like, somebody told me once that in the atheist community you have a lot of Catholics and Jews, because Catholicism is a dogma within itself, and that's it. There's no other alternative for me. But as Protestants, you can go from this, believe this worldview, and that's it. But you can go to a lighter, gentler Protestantism, and then a lighter, gentler like you guys have actually like a ladder of, I don't know, gentleness or belief.
Yeah, why liberalism.
Did you do that? Did you go from this very strict young earth creationist, everything has to be this way or I'm going to hell, to like, you know, Presbyterian, Lutheran, like, because you guys have that option.
There are a lot of people actually. I've been. There's a lot of people that do that. A lot of people do that. That's exactly right. A lot of people go. My route was not that, but I kind of envy the people because it's like a gentler slope. You know, mine was. I was fully in it all the way. And in September of 2019, I'd been studying mythology for about 3 years, very intensely. And it all hit me literally in an hour. I was just like, for the first time in my life, I had this thought up in my head. It was like, is it possible that this isn't real?
You really had a St. Paul moment then.
Yeah, I was
on the road to Damascus, but going in the opposite direction.
Exactly. And it all came flooding in within an hour or less. I was like,
wait, wow. Did you knew about mythology before then?
I did. It was somehow I describe it as like if your worldview is a series of dominoes, but you're a mile away from it and you're walking, you're taking micro steps. Every millimeter you think you're kicking your worldview, but you're not really. But eventually you've made up that mile and you make just one more kick. It feels like just like all the other kicks, but you've gotten close enough to it now that you make that kick and they all tumble. And for me, it was like, is it possible that this isn't real? And I immediately thought, there's no way. Christians would have, if this was full of lies, Christians would have seen through it a long time ago and it would have died out, as did the other mythologies. And then I said, well, but we believe that the Muslims are all deceived en masse and the Hindus are all deceived en masse. Why couldn't we be deceived en masse? And it was like a voice in my head saying, say it, say the words, say the goddamn fucking words. It's not real. And as soon as I said it, I was like, oh my God, there's no God. Like, that makes more sense of my life experience of 43 years than anything else. And it was just like, wham, I was out.
I know maybe others have heard this, but what were the repercussions in terms of family and community?
I lost my marriage. For sure. I just got the divorce just got finalized a couple months ago. Long, horrible, painful process. And my dad had already passed. My mom and I don't talk about it much, but she grieves. She thinks I'm going to burn in hell, and she blames herself for not having done something right to keep me on the straight and narrow, keep me on the path. So she feels like she said she wishes not that I would die, but that she could die. She says she wishes she could die because she feels like she's going to eternally be sad for bringing a child into the world that's going to burn in hell. But in a sense, that's part of the discrepancy of like, if you do believe you're going to go to heaven, there is no pain there. There is no sadness. So therefore, you believe that you have to dance with joy before God and with a smile on your face that's true while I'm being tortured. So you're therefore going to be happy as I'm being tortured. Isn't that a reason to say maybe this doesn't make sense? Your God really is a psychopath if he's going to turn you into a robot that's rejoicing that he's destroying me actively in hell.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But anyway, but yeah, to your original point, there are a lot of people that go slower. And I think that's a great point. People that say, maybe hell isn't real, maybe hell's a metaphor, maybe it was Gehenna, this place with the fire outside of Jerusalem, and they say maybe God isn't so mean to gay people, maybe he doesn't quite prefer it, but he doesn't hate them, and they kind of do this gentle slope, and eventually they're like they're okay with that. But atheism is just a step too far. You don't take that train stop. That's way too far. Nihilism is too bizarre and too painful. But and I think a lot of people, their pendulum swings like that. If you're a true ultra fundamentalist, it's like it's all or nothing. It's either this is it or it's completely false. And I was completely in it for 43 years. It's completely true. And the minute it became false, it became completely false. So, but definitely some people took it slower. I'm glad for them. I'm going to keep going here with some comments. Mark says, but there are some objectively bad men around Trump in the White House. They're endangering. And by the way, I was going to mention this before. Speaking of men around Trump, what's his name? What is his name? I had it here. The Pete Hegseth. He claimed recently he hadn't washed his hands in 10 years. Did you see that?
Ew.
He said he doesn't see it the same way. I'm like, this idea of like the germ theory.
Yeah. Where I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime. I never did.
It's insane. It's insane to think that he even had a chance at getting to be elected, let alone actually elected. Mark says, see here, they're endangering human welfare on a massive scale. When people take their toxicity to the highest position, we really, let me see here, a second. For some reason, it won't let me see your
greed, Mark. I think there's so much greed involved with that.
Yeah. Mark, I apologize. For some reason, StreamYard won't let me see the full comment, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And then, let's see here. Sunshine says, just a story that Texas educators want taught in school. Yeah.
We're actually fighting the 10 Commandments in Texas schools right now.
Yeah, and it's crazy too. There's more than one version of the 10 Commandments. So it's like, which one do you want? It's nuts. Mark says, but we must oppose them. Yep. And Sunshine says, that's true. They're protecting the Epstein crime ring that they're part of, as far as I can tell. That's what creeps me out. The religious people will still support Epstein's bestie. Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, if you're running circles around trying to figure out how God can be good and at the same time do the terrible things that happen, I don't know how Christian right takes Trump and he's not in the true sense of the word Christian. He's the farthest thing from what you guys consider a good Christian. He's probably an atheist, actually. Yeah. And I don't know how they can run the mental circles around believing that this guy's still okay. It's really just revolting.
Well, no, I think to myself, I wish that none of this had happened. But at the same time, if you were to be like, is there any silver lining to it? And there's not much. But one of the silver linings is that it is helping people to realize Christianity is a false worldview, and it is this toxic worldview because of him. To be like, okay, so, and a lot of people don't take it that way. They say, well, this version of Christianity is toxic.
They're lost.
But for a lot of people, they're like, no, this is just, it's one variation of the same theme. This is all bullshit. I'm done.
Or let's keep them separate, church and state. And let me fight for your right to worship. But don't make my laws based on that. I don't want to live in Afghanistan or Iran.
Yeah, or North Korea. Sunshine says, I used to love Jesus and God because I was told I would burn for eternity if I didn't. I used to ask that question to Bertha, and my mom would yell, "Get behind me, Satan." Yeah. Get thee behind me, Satan. That was my mom's answer to many questions. Yeah, that's some sick stuff. That's really sad. Mark says, I prefer cats.
That's okay. I like cats.
I joke to my kids. I say, I love cats. They taste just like chicken.
No, cats are good.
Mark says, the promise of eternal life is just a bum check. Great illustration. Yep. Chris Ashelman, great to see you. Thanks. Thinking reality made us for no personal reason other than our parents' desire to have sex can be difficult to deal with, but also freeing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's amazing too to think that there's a lot of parallels between that and Christianity, especially Calvinism, in the sense that Calvinism would say, like John 3:16 says, you must be born again, and babies don't choose to be born. Babies are just born. You have no say in it. And in the same sense that that's true physically, it's true for Calvinism. Calvinism says you must be born again, but you have no choice in that either. You have no choice to be born or born again. It's all your parents' will. And in this case, it's the spiritual, God's will. But it is sad. But
I highly recommend, and you can find her article easily. Rebecca Goldstein, she is Steven Pinker's wife, and she has a whole book. But the article is enough on mattering and mattering theory, and the idea that we all have to matter, and we all matter. We find our mattering in different ways. Like you might want to be the best in the world at tennis, or you want to have the nicest car on your street, or you want to be the perfect mom or the perfect dad. And we all have to figure out a way to matter. And that goes with that comment. Like look her up, Mattering Theory, Rebecca Goldstein. And the article is in Free Inquiry magazine. And I read that article and it was an epiphany. Like, oh, wow, this is why a lot of people need to matter and they need God.
Yeah.
Because even if you're living homeless under a bridge, if there's some supernatural being that makes you matter, that's why people are religious. It's highly, highly recommend. Rebecca Goldstein.
On a similar note, too, just to add this, and then we'll go to the next comment. I interviewed a while ago Carl Sagan's daughter, Sasha Sagan. And Sasha, do you know her? She wrote a book called "For Small Creatures Such as We," and it's a quote that basically, let me get the exact quote here. For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. It's from Carl Sagan, and I think his wife co-wrote it with him. But the book Contact that became a movie. Again, for small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. And it's the idea of like, if you do really need to matter, you really need to have purpose, that there are ways to create that through our life rituals and things like that. There's beauty to be had. But just the idea, like life is, the universe is so big and we're so small, it feels so insignificant. That vastness is bearable through love, and that love really does change our lives. But we don't need a God for that, for sure. Let's see here. I know we went a little bit over here. I'll just read the last few quickly, and then we'll have Bertha finish up with the final word here. Sunshine says, I know that's why my sister keeps believing. She's afraid of eternal punishment, even though she's very kind and generous. Yeah, so many people stay in it because of fear of hell. The Hebrew God is so insecure around intact males. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Philip says, yes, and as Matt Dillahunty pointed out a few years ago on the Unbelievable show, that's what all this old and new covenant stuff, why not just God have, say, here it is. I'm not sure if I'm understanding, Philip, exactly what you said there, but yeah, I love how Matt Dillahunty points out the stuff just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Steve Dakanis, do you know Steve? Steve's with Recovering from Religion. He's up in Canada.
Yeah.
Steve's awesome. He's a great humanist. Thanks so much, Steve, for popping in. Appreciate it. John Piper is one such horrible Calvinist. Yeah, the idea of the John Piper's books, just the Christian hedonism, that was in my blood. Christian hedonism. Mark says, son, that's so sad about your sister. Someone you care about living in fear. My kids are still trapped in the mindset too. Yeah, so sad. Philip says, there's no eternal hell. People made it up, and remember, there's nothing moral about that doctrine. It's just psychopathic mob boss mentality. You couldn't have described it any better. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there's no way to call him a good father. It's because of the Trump prophecy by Mark Taylor. Yeah, he's going along with them because it's for his own benefit.
Oh yeah. He's making a bundle on this presidency.
Yeah, and then some. It's crazy.
Matter in Theory, Rebecca Goldstein, Free Inquiry is the name of the magazine. Free Inquiry.
Okay, thank you so much. Last few here. Sunshine says, my friend has a YouTube channel and she refers to the source instead of God. I like that. Her channel is Begin Being. It has good info on psychology and such. Yeah, for some people, honestly, spirits. I think it's an important point to make. I don't want to like exactly refer to your comment, Sunshine, but just to say spirituality is something that whether we think it's real or not, or it's just a side effect of consciousness, we feel spiritual. And your version of spirituality, whether it's looking at the sunset, looking at your dog, whatever, creating art, whatever you feel, meditation, yoga, deconversion doesn't have to end where we're all the same. I happen to be more aligned with like Carl Sagan and Richard Dawkins, but if people align more agnostic, whatever they want to believe in the force, we're not here to say that you can't believe what you want. We're just here to say that there's a lot of bad stuff in Christianity that we should all be able to know about the mythology behind it all. And at that point, though, we're not saying that we know. We're not beggars who know where the bread is. We're just saying we're beggars who know where the bread is not, or that there's a bread that's got poison in it. Christianity is bread with poison in it. We know that's not the place to go for your answers, but at that point, there's still so many places to go to figure out. Both in terms of science, what's actually true, but also to decide for yourself how your spirituality is going to flesh out in your life. And it's not wrong to want to think about the source or the one or whatever. I don't go that way. I think it's all woo woo, but at the same point, I want to respect the people land differently, and that's okay.
It's interesting how I don't see Christianity as poison. It's just because we're coming from such different perspectives.
Yeah,
I know so many Christians that do good things. And I know we're talking versions of Christianity and what you were raised in, but it's a different, interesting perspective for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely with Hitchens. Religion poisons everything.
Yeah, I read that book.
That's here. A few final ones here. Mark says, also believe in his life itself, and I feel like connect to it when I have my hands in the soil. Yeah. When I'm stroking the cat. The force I believe is life itself. I connect to it with my hands in the soil. Yeah.
And there's scientific research that putting your hands in the soil is actually very, very good for you.
Yeah, gets us very grounded. Well, could you wrap us up with anything that we didn't get to that you were hoping to share, and then any final words for anyone that's just figuring out how to deconstruct without it feeling like a living hell.
I guess I'm being repetitive, but I think just that it's okay to just let go. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to wake up and you're going to go, wow, I don't have to twist my brain into pretzels anymore. I can just let go. The world is the way it is, and here we are, and just try to do a little good every day and do as little harm as possible and live your best life. You can let go of all that anxiety and everything that sometimes religious indoctrination gives us.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be insignificant. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. In many ways too, I think the idea that we are insignificant technically, but there's a lot of people around us for whom we mean a lot. You think of your kids, your friends, your loved ones.
Yeah.
And when you show up big and you give them so much love, it means the world. And it's like that's a beautiful thing. I don't want to like live for other people as if I don't matter. Like I'm not trying to sacrifice myself the way I was as a Christian, where it's like I died in me and live for Christ. You need to live for yourself, be a little selfish, but like it's a beautiful thing to give yourself away for a greater cause and for the loved ones around you. And you're doing so many good things for the kids that you've touched. I mean, it's got to be hundreds and thousands of kids that you've impacted.
Yeah, and that's teaching really is like Johnny Appleseed. You don't know where the seeds are going to grow. Yeah. And I know I've made a difference in people's lives, and that'll move forward, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful stuff. Well, everyone, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody, being part of the community. It's so good to have you here. And I know, again, we have so many different versions of interview guests. And everyone, I feel like, it's one of the best things about it is that not everyone's going to land the same way. I had a guest just yesterday who was very much into more of a progressive Christianity. To her, God was still real, or at least, to talk about Christ consciousness. It meant something to her, and it was a big deal. I think Bertha and I would probably not put too much stock into that mentality. It's more woo-woo to us. But, everybody's going to land differently. And I just want to say, for those of you going through it, please don't feel like you need to be mimicking the way we've landed. We've landed different places. But I think the one thing I would ask is that a lot of us have been lied to a lot by different versions of Christianity, maybe other religions. And a lot of us have just adopted, just whatever was around us in our culture. And there's such a beautiful thing of saying, I just, as I think is it Matt Dillahunty probably said this, I think, I just want as many true things and as few false things as possible. And that's, the truth will set you free, to quote Jesus. And, it's a beautiful thing to live a life full of truth and to just let go of the lies, even if they're comfortable lies, to say, I'd rather have an examined life. The unexamined life is not worth living, that concept. I want to know the truth even. And I said to Christians around me, Bertha, when I was deconstructing, I did not think I was going to atheism yet in any way. But I remember saying, I'm just investigating some stuff, and I want truth more than my current worldview. And I think it's going to take me right back to my same worldview, because I think it is true. But if it takes me a little differently, I want to go where the truth takes me. And they were horrified that I'd say something like, what the hell are you talking about? But I think it's a beautiful thing to say, I want the truth. And I want to admit that we're all self-deceived, even as atheists. We're self-deceived in different ways. And to say, I'm going to continue to be on this journey of thinking better thoughts and getting more information, scientific information. It's so critical to living a good life. And hopefully we can make a big difference in the next generation. But was there any final words you wanted to add before we wrap up?
That sounds perfect.
Awesome. Well, please come back anytime. If you have the next book or you start a YouTube channel, anytime there's something to put on blast, please come back. We'd love to have you back. But thank you so much. It was really great to hear your story.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.